OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, Thursday morning, it's Ger and Shane with you all the way through until 10 this morning. If you want to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. If you are a Liverpool fan, we'd like to hear from you this morning. I tweeted earlier, a little bit earlier on, Aston Villa will definitely not stand in the way of a reunion. If you want Stevie G, come and get him, just pay the money. We've seen that, that's what the big clubs do, isn't it? They want Graham Potter, they go and pay the money.
Just get him.
He's available.
Yeah.
No, he's not available. Sorry, and obviously, give us 50 quid and whatever change down the back of the
pack of
couch.
Packet
of crisps, some chewy toffees. We'd be happy enough. We wouldn't stand in the way of a dream reunion anyway.
It's funny how football can change.
I mean, you must be feeling yourself.
Yeah.
There's like nothing. I just think about Man United fans, the turnaround in the last 2 weeks, where the absolute terror of going to play Liverpool, or Liverpool coming to play you, when that was 5-0 last year.
Yeah.
And the turnaround from there to here, it's like, well, and it's okay to come out and watch football again.
I mean, when another club takes the focus off United, it's to United fans' delight, because very often the focus is on Manchester United for good reasons and bad. But yeah, Liverpool are doing it, and Chelsea are doing it too.
Chelsea, now, it's funny, the Chelsea thing doesn't make any sense, right? And then you start to read about it, and we actually have Ben Jacobs coming on in about 20 minutes time from CBS Sports. He's written a piece which is basically like, this had been on the cards from very early on. I'm not gonna spoil his lines, but he makes it make sense, because he's obviously done a lot of reporting on the side of the American owners and has sources within the club who are basically saying there's a new system coming and the manager was not suitable for the system. We need somebody who's going to work within the system. That's the line from the owners. So
yeah.
And Potter might be that man.
It's funny that the mixture of opinion pieces in the papers today tend to be people who are like, oh, this is no surprise that Tuchel's gone, and then some people saying, well, this is a surprise, obviously, that Tuchel's gone. If you listen to his post-match press conference after the Zagreb game, you didn't get the sense that he thought his job was in jeopardy. You got the sense that this is a man who wants to take a portion of the blame and accept that it's not a result that the club should have suffered, but there is no indication from him that this was it.
He seems to have been shocked, all right. That's a detail in Ben Jacobs' piece. We talked to Gareth Roberts as well about Liverpool, by the way, so don't worry, we will definitely pick over the carcass of last night's 4-1 defeat. On the Potter thing, it's like this isn't just we're pulling the ejector seat and we're panicking into the next manager. It does seem like Potter is a project manager, someone who will come in and will fit within a system and will help work with the players and will, this isn't Abramovich sacking for the next big celebrity manager.
No, it wouldn't appear so. And he's not the first name that would have, obviously Pochettino was the name that pops into everyone's head straight away, but
he's on their list. Zidane is on their list. Brendan Rodgers is on their list.
Interestingly, he's on every list though, isn't he?
Well,
no matter what.
He does have Chelsea connections. He could fit within the system. He's not big enough anymore that he could be coming in and shouting the odds about the owners. He'd be very glad to get that job now.
He's an option. You'd be surprised if at this stage Potter doesn't get it. But it seems all but done. But I mean,
you were making the point that Kenny was on the football show last night saying he should hang on.
Kelly Cunningham's basically saying that the opportunity might arise in a year or two whenever Pep Guardiola decides to leave, that the Man City job comes up. That's obviously a more lucrative job than Chelsea in terms of challenging for the Premier League title. Maybe you could say that with this Chelsea team in a couple of years you could get there as well. But
they obviously are deciding they're going to spend a lot of money.
Well, yeah, and this is why it's probably not surprising that Brighton allowed Chelsea to speak to Potter, because first of all, Potter asked to speak to Chelsea. You're reading in the papers today as well that this release clause, I think it's at 16 million at the minute, but it tends to go down every single year. So if they're going to get rid of him,
may as well do it now.
Bite the bullet.
The one thing I'd say about waiting, right? If you're Brendan Rodgers, if you think back to when all the big jobs were coming up and he was automatically the first person linked with it, and the only reason he wouldn't have got the Man United gig was because of the Liverpool connections, and that would have been too much. We've seen, and it's he's not really mentioned, So Potter's never going to get Brighton higher than they are at the moment.
Yeah,
maybe they qualify for the Champions League in a Leicester style season, and this is the year to do it. I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah,
but Liverpool appear weak. If Chelsea get the wrong manager now, then suddenly, so all of a sudden, it's a Leicester style push to finish 4th/5th is on the cards at the moment, the way they're playing. But you wait, and the next season 4 of their best players get sold, they get replaced with slightly, and all of a sudden you're finishing 10th, your chance for getting the Chelsea job.
Yeah.
Like our Man City then going, oh, we're going to take the guy who finished 11th.
I know. It's at a plateau at the minute with Brighton where he nearly needs to jump now. Like John Brewin was on the football show last night with the lads and had a really interesting line. Kind of reminded all of us about Brian Kidd taking that Blackburn Rovers job in the 90s, and he was basically saying that the famous line from Kidd was, I don't want to die wondering. Do you know, and it probably was his moment to take a big job from a big Premier League team at the time. It's probably, as you say, in a similar position now where Brighton can't go any higher. If you want to go and take a job at one of the top 4 clubs in the country, do it.
Yeah.
And nobody could blame Potter for doing it. The only thing is, Potter's such a likeable guy, really, really interesting guy as well. Like I was talking to you before we come on air about the masters in emotional intelligence he has. And he's quite clearly an intelligent manager who thinks about things outside. We saw the Rainbow Laces campaign as well. He's a bit of more of a socially conscious manager, kind of along the Southgate lines, I guess. A fascinating fella. But you don't want it to end like it tends to end with managers at Chelsea, because it usually ends in tears.
I would agree, right? The one thing you have to say, and I was making this point the whole way through, is that the ex-manager now was not the choice of the new owners, and the new owners have spent 300 million quid and they're not getting what they want. Like the stories and the details, and again, Ben's piece is excellent, where it's like Bowley's around the place, chatting to everybody, has a great relationship with the captain, the senior players. There's an American superstar who's very unhappy with the minutes he's playing at the moment. Do you know, like Potter will come in and if the deal is you're going to have to take this job and you're going to have to find a way to like get him in the team. Okay, I could do that.
Yeah,
I mean he's a good player. I could do that.
100%. He'd make it work. And Tuchel seemed to. I don't know if the players were fully on board with him towards the end. Maybe Todd Bowley and the owners kind of sensed that. And if he's not following the not instructions but communication levels desired of the owners, then they're of course going to want their own man. And
not a fan of the WhatsApp group apparently, Thomas Tuchel.
This is the thing, you got to stay in touch with your owners. I mean,
there's a game to be played there. Now here's the thing, right? So Tuchel, I don't think Tuchel's reputation has been damaged at all, really.
No.
Well, it's hard to know. Like where does he end up next? Where's the next job for Thomas Tuchel? Like probably not in the Premier League. Obviously a very, very clever guy, could work anywhere, could now take any of the super clubs, has been fired from the 2 most chaotic ones, and so therefore anything after this is going to be relatively straightforward for him.
The scary thing now about this is for me, when I saw it yesterday, my first instinct after I heard the news was obviously surprised, Champions League winning manager with Chelsea. But nowadays in football it seems nothing keeps you safe in a job. Like, I mean, Brendan Rodgers won the FA Cup with Leicester. It's probably not going to save him in the next couple of weeks if results keep going the way they are. So football is just at that point now where you can win whatever tournament you like, and it's just a matter of what the owners like, what they want. It's very, very reactionary, and I would say that about Tuchel. But I think he'll be absolutely fine. His reputation hasn't taken a hit whatsoever. Like they beat West Ham last weekend in the Premier League, Chelsea.
No, it should have been a draw.
You should have been a draw, of course, but it's a results-based business.
It is, but if you think about that, it should have been a draw. As Graham made the point on the show yesterday, it should actually be defeat, draw, defeat. That's the run of 3 games, which he has been sacked for. Like Todd Bowley, he's not having the VAR. He's like, no, that was a goal. We've dropped points there.
Yeah,
it's too late. But look, the fit wasn't right. I think the Potter thing, like Carragher's column today, which is obviously in the Telegraph, carried in the Irish Independent, the sacking of Tuchel will do lasting damage to Chelsea's plans. But I mean, it won't. Like the thing is, it won't.
No,
because they've got so many good players, and they've got so many good young players. Like, you know, we'll hear more about the plans, but
the Champions League is where it's at financially as well. So the owners may be, and look, it might be used as an excuse and a way out. But losing the first game to Dinamo Zagreb in the Champions League group stage, you have to get out of that group. So you've only got 5 games left now to do it. The sooner a new manager is brought in, the better chance he has of getting the team out of the group.
Well, that's the bit. It's like, oh, wait for the international break and you give yourselves plenty of time to do it. But they've obviously been thinking who the next manager was.
Yeah.
They didn't just like wake up, go, oh, I'm going to sack him. Who's good? Oh, they're ahead of us in the table. We might be able to get him. What's the story? Like this buyout clause, release clause that Graham Potter had. How did everybody know about that? How did that suddenly leak out? It's like top secret situation where Graham Potter has like this flashing light going, 16 million. It's like one Karnik Chukwuemeka and you get the manager of your dreams.
Was it the Brighton chairman or someone came out in an interview and kind of almost hinted at the fact that...
Did he?
I remember something to that effect, or reading about that yesterday, like maybe that the Brighton chairman came out at one point in an interview. Did Chelsea personnel watch that interview? I would say absolutely yes.
Well, I mean, they're all hanging out now. Todd Bowley literally had
They said he wanted to meet Potter and Pochettino.
Right.
Whether he met Pochettino as well yesterday,
I'd say he's already met Pochettino before now.
Probably,
you know.
Yeah.
Got to do your due diligence.
It looks a bit strange now if Potter doesn't.
Just game of golf, a bit of steak afterwards.
Yeah, sweet talk. But I mean, if Potter doesn't take the job now for whatever reason, Pochettino was left knowing, I wasn't the main guy. But I don't think he'll care.
They've got to get over themselves pretty quick, don't they?
Yeah, 100%. But the next, like, you'd imagine today or tomorrow, there's going to be a solution. Like, Potter's going to have to make his mind up fairly quickly on this one. Like, we're mid-season here.
Christian Falk reporting that Tuchel's refusal to sign Ronaldo was one of the main moments that contributed to the deterioration in the relationship between the owners and him. I mean, like, it doesn't bode very well. But
if manager doesn't want to sign a player, just forget about the player.
Yeah. Like, instead, though, in fairness, like, they have spent a load of money to sign Aubameyang.
Well, yeah,
which is basically the same player.
Yeah,
at the stage of their careers.
It's and all the interviews last week, the Aubameyang, where I can't wait to get playing with Thomas Tuchel again. And then he plays like an hour under him, maybe.
Is he going to show up? Is he going to be on time? Is he going to be disciplined? Is he going to get sacked again before Christmas and be back to Barcelona or whoever for free? Who knows? OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effort that's finished today. We are going to talk about Liverpool though with Gareth Roberts in about 25 minutes time, because I don't know what's going on here. I mean, I guess Klopp afterwards is asked, what's going on? And he's like, well, you saw the game. You saw the game. We all know what happened. We do all know what happened. Joe Gomez had one of those games where it looks like he won a competition
howler
to play football, and he got away with a couple of the mistakes, and they got away with a missed penalty, and they got away with a sitter after 25 seconds.
Yeah,
like
it could have been a lot worse.
It should have been 7.
Yeah, 100%.
It would one of the other questions was, have you ever played that badly in a first half? It's like, well, Villa. I mean, do we just forget about the Villa game?
Yeah,
yeah.
What? And I think you referenced a previous Napoli game a couple of years ago as well. Like,
so obviously they're haunted. Napoli. I do think though that there's something else. It can't just be Joe Gomez, can it?
No, 100% not. But it's the players. Like, if you look at the attitude of the players at the minute, and it's very easy to point at the players when results aren't going well, but like you need to. Trent Alexander-Arnold was woeful last night as well. Virgil van Dijk, uncharacteristic errors, left, right and centre.
James Milner, a good goalkeeper.
And he started complaining after that penalty. I mean, he was like, that wasn't a handball. It was the most blatant handball you'll ever likely to see. But like Pep
what was he doing? What was he doing? You know, he didn't want to look like Virgil with his hands behind the back because it would have been hypocritical. So instead, he puts his hands out and goes, "Well, okay, same result."
But I mean, wasn't it Pep Linders, the assistant manager of Liverpool, often said our identity is intensity, and Liverpool's intensity levels this season haven't been anywhere near what they have been. Like, I think that the running stats were referenced last night on the television as well, but like, I'm just looking at some of the stats here in front of me from Liverpool. This season, an average of 3.4 kilometres per match, they're running less than opposition teams. A total of 20 kilometres less than their opponents over the 6 Premier League games. And in the corresponding fixtures last season, the first 6 games, they'd run 11 kilometres more.
Right.
So, I mean...
Big swing.
A massive swing. But, I mean, it's hard to pinpoint what the reason for that is. Is it the training? Is it Is it too many games last season? Is it attitude of the players?
But it's very difficult to know exactly what the situation is that has caused that drop-off. Was it like, did their heart get broken at the end of last season when we kept saying, they're going for 4, and then the stuff that matters falls through their fingers at the end? There
is that. You have to look at it. Klopp is a great man for excuses, but they did have 8 outfield players, I think, on the bench last night, as opposed to Napoli's 11. They have had their injuries. I know Henderson's out at the minute, but Thiago came back. It's not really an excuse.
The owners didn't spend any money.
Well, yeah, they don't.
And they get away with it. They get away with like being, we're this great because we really care. We kept the stadium, we've rebuilt the stadium, we've got everything organised, and there's no... It's like, they get a free pass.
Well... What was striking?
They've literally got one of the greatest managers in the history of the game in charge, and they've sat in their hands and they haven't backed him in the transfer market in a way that they could have done to make sure that they keep pace with the oil. He is keeping pace with the oil countries, and you're like, Well, net spend, I don't know what the net spend was this is
I was looking at the
hardly
net
any.
spend even last night. The net spend, the stats from June, the net spend for Liverpool was 199 million. They were ninth essentially out of Premier League teams.
Out of But over what period of time?
So since 2017, which is a bit ridiculous. Like United
While
were
you've
top.
had Klopp,
Yeah, 100%.
and while he's been winning,
Imagine
you've
if they
watched
had backed
everybody
him.
else.
But the thing that struck me last night, and I don't want to overstate it, it's one game at the end of the day, but they haven't been good this season. Cycles for these teams have to reach an end at some point. And Klopp, Liverpool fans will want Klopp to go out on his own terms or in a positive way. You don't want it to end badly.
They don't want him to go out at all. That is a disaster if he leaves. Because the only thing keeping them relevant at the moment is his genius.
Yeah.
So who's going to come in? Steven Gerrard coming in? Somebody else?
But if this is the cycle coming to an end for this team, then Klopp should leave, because that's the time for a successful manager to go. Ferguson did it. Wenger didn't really do it, but
Ferguson didn't. Ferguson stayed 4 times the cycle ended and kick-started
he just kept
it again.
rebuilding a new cycle. Klopp was going to realise that's not going to happen with this Liverpool team unless they do back him in the transfer window, and that doesn't seem to happen. Did they really replace Mane? I'm not so sure. Salah didn't look fantastic last night. Firmino's looked good this season, to be fair to him, but as a team, as a whole, they're just all over the shop. The attitude was something else, and you could tell from minute go yesterday it just wasn't going to go their way. I don't know. You can make excuses till the band come home, but Liverpool this season just have been off the pace in every single sense. And the attitude is the main thing from my perspective. I don't know what Klopp doesn't like going to Naples. That's his 4th time there, and he's never won. But
I don't think it's a disaster for them, because they can't just replace Gomez and they can't take Milner out of the team, and there's definitely a way for them to recover from this. But you would say that there's systems failures, there's individual levels of form that, as you talked about, Virgil, uncharacteristic mistakes, but now kind of quite characteristic over the last 4 months. And then also the form of Mo Salah. What the hell is going on there?
Yeah,
they're not using him in exactly the same way. They're trying to accommodate the new signings, and it just isn't working at the moment. So
you're seeing Salah and Firmino walking off the pitch together last night in a double substitution, and who was it come out? And Nunez and Jota replaced them. But to see even Salah walking off the pitch as a substitution is so strange from anyone's perspective. It just doesn't happen.
No.
And probably the only bright point for Liverpool last night, some Liverpool fans might disagree, was Luis Diaz. He was excellent. Probably the only player on the pitch that could maybe hold his head up high for Liverpool. Whereas Napoli all over the pitch, and Guisto was just.
Alisson was quite good.
He was okay. Considering he conceded 4, but as for a keeper who conceded 4, he didn't do badly. But some of those Napoli players put themselves on the map. I mean, the Anguissa fell in the middle of the park was just extraordinary for them last night. They just had players, and then Diego Simeone's kid coming off the bench to score a goal. And Atletico, of course, winning in the 96th or 99th minute, I think, as well. So a good day out or night evening for the Simeone family. But I mean, I don't know. Is the atmosphere in Naples? It hardly gets to the Liverpool players. They're quite used to this sort of thing. But I mean, I was talking to Emma outside, and she made the point that sometimes Liverpool make a bad start in the Champions League and they go on to win the bloody thing. So maybe we'll be looking back at this conversation next May.
There are some Liverpool-shaped straws that Liverpool fans are clutching to this morning. If you're a Liverpool fan, we would like to hear from you, though. What the hell's going on? It's 7:48. You can leave a comment in the YouTube stream, or, of course, you can get us on 0879 180 180. That's the WhatsApp number. Thomas Hunt, Klopp out. Jonathan Marrow, Klopp still at Liverpool. It's shocking. Klopp at the wheel, says James Sullivan.
For United fans this morning, is it?
You've got to take these moments when you can get them, right? Because it's a long out season, and who knows where it's going to end.
Yeah, there's a lot of Liverpool fans in WhatsApp groups slagging United fans after the opening 2 games, kind of saying relegation was on the cards. So football comes back to bite fans pretty quickly. But
will Liverpool make the top 4 this season?
Are we starting that conversation already?
I mean, 2 years ago they squeaked in. They shouldn't have made it, and they did.
But then, you could argue City and Spurs are pretty much nailed on for it. If United continue what they've done in the last 4 games, they could probably sneak into a top 4 maybe. But I mean, yeah, it's a fair argument, I think, at this point.
Graham Potter's Chelsea.
Graham Potter's Chelsea or Graham Potter's Brighton, whichever team he continues to stay with until the end of the season.
Chris Cal says Potter's in a no-lose situation, 10 million plus a year, and if it fails, he won't get the blame. You have to take the job, I think. You can't hold on for the City job that might never come, and you don't even know if you're a City's guy, you know?
The only thing is obviously a loyalty to Brighton if he feels like he has that sort of loyalty. But then he's up in the conversations with Chelsea yesterday, so the loyalty isn't exactly.
Brighton are
there.
getting paid.
Yeah,
That's a good deal.
and he's going to get 7 figures, you'd imagine, for the year to manage a club like Chelsea. I know the money's probably not all it for him, but I mean,
Sorry, 8 figures.
8 figures. Sorry, of course he's already on 7. But yeah, I mean, such a likeable fella.
Yeah,
Graham
I'm
Potter.
delighted for him.
I'm shocked that Man United weren't in for him before Ten Hag was kind of mooted. His name wasn't even mentioned really. It was Ten Hag or Poch.
Yeah.
But I mean, his name is now mooted with every single vacancy that comes up, a big vacancy. So yeah, I think you're right. He has to probably take the job.
Game every 3 days between now and the World Cup is going to be very hard for any manager, says John Claffey. It is going to be a pell-mell situation for whoever takes over whatever of the jobs become available. Right, I'm delighted to say Ben Jacobs is with us this morning. Ben, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
It's been a pretty busy 24 hours or so for you. Your reporting on this story is really interesting, and you've got really interesting details about when the divorce that was made public yesterday actually started in theory to happen. Is it right to say that a pre-season friendly, which none of us really cared about at the time, is now one of the seminal moments in Thomas Tuchel's life at Chelsea?
Yeah, I think so. Not because of the result. Chelsea travelled to America, and in Orlando they played Arsenal and they lost 4-0. And obviously nobody should care about a pre-season result, but Thomas Tuchel's reaction was fiery. And Todd Boehly is all about people and culture at a football club. So Tuchel had been given more responsibility at Chelsea, which he'd asked for. And with that responsibility, naturally comes the balancing of lots of different things. And the new ownership group effectively felt like Tuchel shouldn't have been publicly that critical of the movement in the transfer market, because he knew that after that pre-season, there was months left of the window and in excess of 250 million to come, because he'd been told what the budget was. And if you're the manager and you're given more autonomy over transfers, then with that also comes accountability. So to bemoan the lack of movement and the problems with the transition didn't go down well with the new ownership group. And that began a kind of frostiness where Tuchel wanted to focus after that loss only on football, and the ownership group being quite inexperienced because Todd Boehly was interim. So where the manager wanted to do his actual job title, which is head coach, because he's preparing for a new season, and the ownership group needed him to step up and be a more active part of transfers. So when you add all of that up, that was the first point when the relationship broke down, and it only got worse from there as things got more chaotic as the window progressed. Now, I should point out that there's huge respect for Thomas Tuchel from the ownership group. They just assessed him, his personality, as well as his ability to coach a football team. They looked at the dressing room as well and worked out.
We're just having a bit of trouble with your line there, Ben. We might just give you a quick dial back to see if we can get you on a slightly better line, because I don't want anybody to miss the detail of how the relationship breaks down. It's like any relationship, right, where on the face of it everything looks good, but it's the tiny little details that trip people up.
Like, it's only when the sacking happens that you realise what's gone on behind the scenes. And as I said, like yesterday, the immediate reaction of most football fans was, Jesus, Tuchel's got the sack. They're doing okay, not terribly in the league, and obviously they lost their first Champions League game. But then when you see the stats and the facts behind what's going on behind the scenes, because we just don't get that insight from a football perspective in a club until the sacking happens. But I mean, the Todd Boehly relationship with him now has come to light, and Graham Potter is going to be absolutely adamant to stick very close to Todd Boehly after what's happened here, because you can't fall out with bosses. You simply can't. And I know Eric Ten Hag recently was talking about his relationship with the Glazers, and he spoke about the fact that, yeah, we do keep communication. We definitely speak every now and again, but that's important. You can't be missing the WhatsApps to your bosses. So yeah, it's interesting to see that the fact that he's the priority, Graham Potter, but they need to make it happen today, you'd imagine. But the Tuchel stuff and the insight, as Ben has, is just fascinating. Yeah,
you can read his stuff on cbssports.com. There's a great piece about behind the scenes of Thomas Tuchel sacking, how Chelsea lost confidence in him, and it comes in those details where they're like, so you're going to help us with the transfer policy, and then he goes public with the transfer policy is nonsense. They're like, well, what? It's yours. You're involved in this.
Yeah, and I think that the nasty thing from a lot of football fans' perspective was the fact that they spent so much money in recent times, over 200 million quid, and then still the manager gets the sack. So I mean, there's one manager who's now spent all this money on all these players, and yet a new manager comes in to either reap the benefits or suffer the consequences. So yeah, that's the fascinating thing with football. All right. Scary.
It's 7:55. I think we can go back to Ben, and we'll go back to Ben. We may as well. You can hear us, Ben, okay, can you? Yeah, great. We were just talking about the details there, and you've got some great details about it. Them trying to keep in touch and keep communication going with the very modern mechanism of a WhatsApp group, which Thomas Tuchel wasn't having too much of.
No, I mean, Thomas Tuchel wanted to do things his way with autonomy, and the new ownership group were all about communication. And that's because moving forwards, Chelsea are looking for a recruitment model that's going to be a bit more similar to Liverpool's, which is decision by panels and also using data. And Tuchel obviously has his own way of doing things that is a little less team-orientated, which is not a huge criticism of Tuchel, because there's a whole debate naturally around what the best way is to make decisions. But I think that with the new ownership group, Todd Boehly in particular, who's chairman and interim sporting director, has come from the LA Dodgers, where he's still minority owner, and they are very data-led. And Boehly is all about delegation and using experts in different fields to collaboratively come to decisions. And Thomas Tuchel is a football person who is a coach first and foremost. So he wanted his views to be effectively implemented away from the actual coaching on things like player transfers, but he wanted delegation. And he was disappointed in some respects that he was asked to take on a more senior business-orientated or managerial role away from the football at the same time as Chelsea was struggling. And that was the first point when the relationship broke down. They lost 4-0 to Arsenal in America in pre-season. That result shouldn't matter, as I said before, but it did because of how Thomas Tuchel reacted to it. It wasn't about the football itself or the result. It was about the fact that Thomas Tuchel showed he wasn't a fit to this new ownership group with the manner in which he bemoaned that result. And then from there onwards, communication broke down. And with the WhatsApp group, that's very common. Lots of football clubs have a WhatsApp group. They go back and forth in it. They drop in transfer targets. But again, it's less about how the communication took place and more about the speed of the response. And because Todd Boehly, as interim sporting director, even though he has a lot of very positive qualities, one of them is that he is able to negotiate. But on the downside, he hasn't got the experience specifically around football. So he needed Tuchel to get back to him quickly and urgently and constantly, because if everything was empowered by Tuchel and Boehly didn't have that football knowledge to just click his fingers and get things done, even though he's surrounded by other experts, then Tuchel had to be part of that process during the window, and he wasn't. And I think that heavily contributed towards his downfall.
It feels as if this was never going to work because or maybe it would have worked if they got a sporting director in immediately who knew exactly what he was doing and Tuchel could have built a relationship with him. But when that didn't happen, asking Tuchel to do two bits of a job and then it not really working out, it suggests that they needed the results to go really well at the start of the season if he was going to have some longer rope. What else is happening behind the scenes? The players seem... There was certainly talk about players being unhappy about different things. We had Graham Hunter on the show yesterday. He said that some of the subs have been looking at what Tuchel was doing on the touchline going, is that what he's saying about us when we're on the field? And if he's saying that stuff about us and we're not in the team, then what does he actually think of us? So it wasn't the happiest of dressing rooms, and yet at the same time, you know, obviously they had got success together, so there was some residual respect, but it does seem as if there were some cracks appearing with the players and the manager as well.
I think respect is the key word, and the players are never going to argue otherwise, especially now a manager's gone that won them a Champions League. But it was inconsistency, really, and this comes with big squads too, that Thomas Tuchel, on the one hand, intimated certain players were surplus to requirements, and then weeks later they found themselves in the starting lineup. Hakim Ziyech and Christian Pulisic are two good examples of that. And then there's a few at the football club that felt like more should have been done to try and keep Tony Rudiger. And subsequently, it has been revealed that Chelsea didn't do that much in terms of offering him improved terms that were good enough. And he was such a key part of the club as well. And then, unfortunately for Chelsea during pre-season, there were one or two that just weren't quite right at the very beginning when the squad returned. And even Cesar Azpilicueta is an example of that, because he thought he was going to Barcelona. Luckily, from Chelsea's perspective, he wasn't ever going to force his way out the club and has now decided to stay. So that actually turned into a positive. But Marcos Alonso is another example of a player that wanted out. And then there were mass outgoings, including Christensen and Lukaku on loan to Inter. And that creates a almost mentality where if you're a player like Ziyech or Pulisic, you're watching the fact that Lukaku's been able to force his way out and get a loan deal to Inter. You're watching the fact that Alonso says he wants to leave. You're hearing the fact the club captain wants to go to Barcelona. So those kind of players are thinking, well, we'll look for a move as well. And it kind of breeds a divided dressing room. And unfortunately for Tuchel, he had to handle that whilst juggling a lot of other plates. So then, as you say, when results don't go your way, the players start to use their own power to kind of make their real feelings clear. And I don't think anyone revolted against Tuchel, by the way. It's certainly not suggest, it's not what I've heard from sources, that the players contributed in any way to the sacking of Thomas Tuchel. I think the ownership group saw enough directly from him to make that decision. But what I would say is that if you look at Abramovich during the entire tenure, he was very distant and probably never had a meaningful face-to-face conversation with that many, if any, of the players, aside from when he was on the field, when they won the Champions League. Whereas with Todd Boehly as interim sporting director, as chairman, and as a new minority owner, and as a person that just has a different approach to how to run a business, he's there at Cobham almost every day, and that will continue for the foreseeable future, even when they appoint a sporting director. So that FaceTime is really key, because it means that not only does he see and hear things firsthand, but if he wants to talk to a player and hold a meeting and hear somebody's perspective directly, he'll do that. And that's exactly what happened, that Todd Boehly has been talking to players, and that's not around only Tuchel. It's not around trying to find out whether or not the players want the manager out. It's a broader point of he's hands-on and he wants to hear perspectives. So that's quite rare for an owner to be doing that. And it's a complete move away from how Abramovich handled his business and his football club. So it's never a case anymore of the ownership group hearing whispers or players having to result. It's an open-door policy at Chelsea. And I think before sacking Thomas Tuchel, Todd Boehly, Behdad Eghbali and the rest of the Chelsea ownership group already felt they knew the full picture and that Thomas Tuchel wasn't a fit.
Should he, Ben, have done more? Like, I mean, in terms of attracting players, obviously the manager often leaves things to a sporting director or someone involved in negotiations. And I get the sense from your piece this morning as well that maybe Tuchel was the architect of his own downfall, and that he potentially, in particular to do with signings, Rafinha being one of them, that maybe he could have been more hands-on and more direct in negotiations himself.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's tough because it's pre-season, it's a transfer window, it's new owners, it's a Premier League season and a World Cup year. Everything is very condensed, and a manager doesn't want to spend too much time and energy chasing something he thinks he can delegate, especially not when he's a head coach by name. But the reality is there's fine margins in a number of these transfers, and when you've got a new interim sporting director who doesn't know the industry, the manager is key, because Todd Boehly has a lot of incredible qualities. He's a great negotiator, and he's very capable, by the way, of holding these meetings, because ultimately the old regime are still advising him. So he's not just going in completely cold, but it's like a politician where you walk into 5 diverse meetings in a day, and before each one, your assistants and civil servants hand you a briefing document. And Boehly is very good at processing that document and ultimately using it to his advantage. But you still need the manager there to make the final decision. And when Boehly and the American-led consortium joined, they gave Thomas Tuchel the power. They told him that they would back him, but in return, they needed him to be part of the pitch. So then when you look at Rafinha, that was a player that Thomas Tuchel desperately wanted, and obviously they agreed a fee with Leeds. So at that point, Todd Boehly can't do too much more, but Thomas Tuchel needs to be in the ear of the player, because everybody knew that he'd also agreed terms in March with Barcelona and had a decision to make as to whether he was going to wait for Barcelona or join Chelsea instantly on better terms. With Jules Koundé Chelsea came for him a year ago, couldn't sign him due to circumstances out of their control, came back for him at the beginning of the window, and the player looked around London for housing. And then they turned to countless other defensive targets before coming back to Jules Koundé. And again, Todd Boehly agreed a, broadly speaking, verbal package to get the deal done. And Barcelona entered the room once again. And Xavi was calling both players, Rafinha and Jules Koundé, and giving them a clear plan. And Thomas Tuchel wasn't. So in the end, Jules Koundé thought, Chelsea have kind of messed me around for over a year. Barcelona really want me. And Rafinha thought, Barcelona really want me. It's my dream move. I'll just keep Chelsea on hold. Now, that's not only Tuchel's fault, but it's two examples. And then you've got Ronaldo, where Todd Boehly was very intrigued by Ronaldo. Thomas Tuchel said no. And that, for me, from Tuchel's perspective, is perfectly fine, because if he's to be given the power as manager, then when he says no, then that should be the end of the matter. But when you decline a player, there's a way of doing it. And I think that it's not just about these examples that I've given. It's about the manner in which they took place. So rather than just accepting that the manager has final say, but he might be asked about different things and different players from his interim sporting director. I think Tuchel saw Boehly more as owner, more as chairman, and didn't necessarily embrace or work well with the interim sporting director title, because he was so used to ultimately operating with Mourinho, who did all the legwork and left him to it. And I think that with Ronaldo, when the player was suggested, he was dismissed by Tuchel. So then when Ronaldo was brought up again, or when Tuchel's tactics were questioned by the new ownership group, and then again asked whether Ronaldo would fix the problem, at that point I think he felt like, why has Ronaldo come up 3 times? Why do you keep revisiting this? I'm the expert, I'm the head coach. And a lot of fans will hear that and say, you're absolutely right, Thomas. This new ownership group are interfering too much. And I think that will divide opinion. But whether or not you side with Tuchel or side with the new ownership group, that relationship in the eyes of the new ownership group became untenable, because there was just a constant disagreement over lots of little things, and one niggly disagreement is fine, and 5 or 6 start to breed a culture where they don't get on. But after 7 or 8 of these examples that I've given, the situation becomes untenable because communication started to break down.
Yeah, it's like any relationship. It's tiny little details trip it up, and over a period of time, you're eating too loudly, you're breathing too loudly. I don't like I no longer like you. It's not you, it's me. No, it's definitely you. It just feels like that divorce was imminent. Can I just ask a little bit though about is Graham Potter walking into a situation where he's going to have to get Ronaldo at Christmas and put Pulisic in the team for every game, and or is that? Are the problems you're talking about actually short-lived, because they'll appoint somebody to the role and Boehly will eventually take a step back?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, and that's why I feel sorry for Thomas Tuchel, simply because this transfer window is an anomaly due to the sanctions that Chelsea had before the new owners arrived, due to the speed of the sale, due to new faces and strategies, due to the board shake-up, the amount of outgoings of players and the money spent. All have created a storm, and maybe any manager that was used to the old regime would have struggled to handle it. And then going forwards, as you say, Todd Boehly won't be the interim sporting director, and I think that his removal from that position is going to be very key. And then from Graham Potter's perspective, he's used to working in a system where decisions are made by numbers, and he has his own recruitment specialist, and he's quite happy to work under a sporting director. And the best example of that is actually historical at Brighton, where Potter and Dan Ashworth had a phenomenal relationship. And that is the model that Graham Potter likes, with lots of different analysts, with lots of different perspectives, whether that's football-orientated, data-orientated, science-orientated, and so on, all contribute. And then he's allowed to continue his work thinking tactically because he trusts the people. And it's that word trust that's going to be really key going forwards. And I don't think that Todd Boehly pretends to be a football expert. And I think that the reason why any new manager can have more confidence and faith in their stability and not think that they're joining a cutthroat club is because you can actually look at the LA Dodgers and see there the culture that's been built. and realise from that particular club that there isn't a huge amount of change, there isn't a huge amount of turmoil in terms of players and staff. There is some stability there, and people at the Dodgers speak very highly. And Potter will do his due diligence, of course. He'll call and ask around. So that's quite reassuring. I think if you had this ownership group and they weren't involved in other sports franchises, there might be more alarm bells. But the end game, the long-term vision, is there for all to see at the LA Dodgers on and off the football field. And that will give Potter and anyone at Chelsea some confidence that Bowley does have a plan. And these, to some extent, are very dramatic, but ultimately just teething problems. And the other thing with Potter is just that he will benefit from areas where Tuchel didn't during the next window beyond, because a sporting director will have arrived, a technical director might have arrived, and Chelsea's owners will have had a lot more time at the club to work out the culture and any learning. So when you add all of that up, I think that Potter will be the beneficiary of this new ownership group, and Tuchel, unfortunately, was the sort of trial and error head coach that some would say in many ways through no fault of his own, and through some ways because of his personality and his manner of behaving away from the coaching, just wasn't the right fit.
Yeah, and the next manager will obviously also be the choice of the new owners, and so therefore, it reflects badly on them if it doesn't work out. So they're going to try and make it work in a million different ways, and we've seen this in all sports that new owners come in, they want their guy, and their guy gets first crack at it. So there's a managerial merry-go-round about to get kicked off if Potter does take the gig, and it looks for all intents and purposes that that's more likely to happen than not. Will Brendan Rodgers be a potential for Brighton? Is that Leicester job up for him? What's your take on that? Because I know you've been covering this story as well.
Yeah, I think that Brighton respect Brendan Rodgers, and the question is whether Rodgers sees the current crop of players and the form that they're in and thinks that that's going to be a more stable gig than Leicester. There's no reason to leave Leicester if you look at Rodgers' long-term tenure there, because he's still got an ownership group that would like to try and back him, but they've had to take a step back financially because of COVID. Their business isn't duty-free, and the fact that Leicester have paid high wages for a long time as a byproduct of their success. And then add to that a lot of money has also been spent on an excellent new training facility. So even though that's positive in the long term, in the short term, it's meant that everything's dried up and Brendan Rodgers is very frustrated. So if Brighton were to make an approach, would he potentially consider a move? And I think from Brighton's perspective, they very much see Brendan Rodgers as a candidate. Brighton would also, in my view, and speaking to sources actually originally based upon the Chelsea gig, I think Brighton would look at Pochettino. It again remains to be seen whether Pochettino would look at Brighton. And wouldn't it be funny as well if Thomas Tuchel considered Brighton? I don't think that one's a possibility. But Brendan Rodgers will be in the mix for sure. He's the manager that Paul Barber, the Brighton CEO, really likes and respects. And I think it's a fit in many ways. And the only question mark from Rodgers' point of view is if you remove a few players like Caicedo, for example. A lot of this Brighton squad is ageing, and it's in stark contrast to the Leicester squad that Brendan Rodgers has built, where Kasper Schmeichel's gone to Nice, Jamie Vardy's in his last season or two, having just signed a new contract. But there's a lot of young blood coming through from Leicester, and the whole point of that academy that they've spent their money on is there's more to come. Whereas if you remove, say, Caicedo from the Brighton mix, you've got players like Webster, Gross, Trossard and so on, who are all in red-hot form and are brilliant in the way they play. But is there the same youth and depth there, or does Rodgers kind of have to start and build again? And then how much money has he got in the transfer market? I think that Brighton are healthy financially, but they're prudent in how they spend. So he's not going to get the same kitty as he's had at Leicester in seasons gone by. But where Brighton are now, and the fact that this season they could get into European football, could well be of appeal to Brendan Rodgers. And I think there's definitely a job in the Premier League that Rodgers right now, if it was available, would leave Leicester for, simply because of the situation. Yeah. Now, Brighton may be that job. If it isn't Brighton, he might wait for an Aston Villa with Gerrard under pressure. I don't think he'd have any problem to go to Everton either, despite the Liverpool links. But it's those kind of jobs And at the moment, because of Brighton's form and how well run the club is, and that's in stark contrast, at least in terms of financial health, to Leicester at the moment, I do think it is a possibility that Brendan Rodgers would consider Brighton if they come calling.
Okay. Sorry, one last question. You've been really good with your time, but the dinner that Todd Bowley hosted for the other chairman, is that maybe where he found out about the buyout clause in Graham Potter's contract? Because that became public very quickly over the last 24 hours, but obviously in football it might have been a bit of an open secret. From that dinner, he appears to have got a left-back, Karney Chukwuemeka, and now a manager. So however expensive and nice it was, it seems to have been worth it from his perspective.
Yeah, he got derided for that meal, and it just shows you the novel approach can pay off. And instead of thinking of football clubs as rivals, I think Bowley wants to work collectively and collaboratively, and he also has a good relationship through Clearlake Capital, the majority owner at Chelsea, with Newcastle's owners as well, because the PIF, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, part of the investment portfolio of Clearlake Capital, and they were seen together at Stamford Bridge, Newcastle and Chelsea's owners, and this is what we're going to see, is a number of executives talking very openly. But I don't think that dinner was the place where the release clause was known about. I think it was before that, to be honest, because there's a number of people in football at lots of different clubs that when Potter suddenly becomes available, and he was linked with Spurs a few years back as well, they've always said the same thing, that there's a release clause there. And that's just kind of credit to Brighton in many ways, that they accept their position, even as a Premier League club at the moment, are in a European position, and they're not going to stand in Potter's way. And it also tells you that lots of clubs are lining him up, whether that was Spurs historically, whether that's the FA for England, and now Chelsea. So I think Bowley at that meal definitely broached the Cucurella and the Chukwuemeka subjects, and each of them paid off, and he was able to complete those deals very quickly. But with the clause, it wouldn't remotely surprise me if even people at Chelsea's old regime were well aware of what it took to release Potter. Because from Paul Barber's point of view at that meal, he's not going to talk about his manager leaving and give the finances in such an informal setting, but it could well have provoked a relationship after that meal where they had a more private conversation more recently, and that was when Bowley realised that Graham Potter was very gettable. And the speed at which this appointment has happened definitely confirms that this wasn't a loss to Dinamo, a sacking, and then a mad scramble to try and find a manager. Because to get a meeting yesterday with Potter, to know you can get him financially and that Brighton give you that blessing, it's absolutely obvious that Todd Bowley was starting to line up Graham Potter probably a week or two ago, not a day or two ago.
Yeah, Ben, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
All the best.
That's Ben Jacobs there. His piece is excellent. It's on cbssports.com. You should check it out. A reminder, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're going to speak with Gareth Roberts about Liverpool next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the ball.
I don't think Springboks are in crisis because you would hate for a team that is so phenomenally good a year out from the World Cup to be world number one and then to go out in the quarterfinals.
Yes, Stephen, we know.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
You cannot mention the title race without immediately turning your head to Chelsea and everything that they have achieved. Are you on the side that they are going to continue their dominance this year, or do you think there are other teams in the league that have caught up to them or can give them a bit of a challenge? I know Arsenal did to a certain extent last year, but it still felt like it was Chelsea's.
Yeah, I think they've made a lot of signings as well, haven't they? They've lost some key players, like G, been there for so long, and maybe Drew Spence isn't sort of. You look at the starting 11 and say, oh well, they haven't lost a key part of the starting 11, but they lost a key player in the dressing room. Anderson was, there for quite a few years. They've kind of got some key characters to replace there, and they've done some interesting transfer business. Obviously, Kadisha Buchanan is such a good signing. With somebody like Jelena Kankovic, who's been one of the best players to watch in Sweden for quite a while, is like an intriguing one. Spitkova as well. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they've got so much attacking talent, right? But they need to kind of balance, I think. And, maybe that was the problem in the Champions League last year as well, just having that balance between attack and defence that, teams, if they can get them on the back foot and exploit that, then we could be in for a real tight title race. So, we'll see if Chris Guerrero comes over. She might be over by the time you put this out, but that kind of player might bring them a bit more steel in that midfield and just make them a little bit more solid and less soft in, I guess, on the counter in a way.
Is there anyone you think outside of Chelsea and Arsenal who will...
I think City could. City have the star quality in their team, and they've got players that have done it, players with big experience. But I don't think outside of that, unless somebody has a real kind of turn up and upsets the apple cart, I think it'll be those three. If not, just Arsenal and Chelsea.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good, but this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD branches nationwide. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies. Used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
You heard Amy Rushkai there, Gold's women's football correspondent, speaking with Karen and Kathleen in this week's episode of Koi Gig Pod, which is available now, previewing the start of the WSL season this weekend. Koi Gig Pod on OTB is in association with Cadbury FC, official snack partner to the Republic of Ireland women's national team. Now, a little bit late because of the breaking news about what's happening at Chelsea. We're getting to Liverpool and just trying to find out what exactly is going on. Gareth Roberts is with us. Gareth, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning. I've been better, fair to say.
Is it just that Joe Gomez was really bad last night and that's the problem? Or is there something more fundamental going on here too?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a good night for Joe, obviously, and he's subbed off at half-time, and rightly so, but he's not alone in being someone that could have been subbed off. I think, it was one of those performances where a lot of people are using the word now, malaise, and that might be a little bit dramatic, but it did seem to be across the team, and what was worrying for me was just sort of some of the basics just weren't there. I mean, there was a point there where Fabinho misses 3 tackles in a row, and that is very un-Fabinho. Like, there's a point there where Mo Salah puts his hand up to receive a ball. He receives the ball, and he just completely miscontrols it. We can see Trent, Alexander-Arnold and Virgil van Dijk, both who've been absolutely brilliant for Liverpool, making fundamental, basic mistakes. You got Van Dijk giving penalties away, which he didn't do for 150 games for Liverpool. Now he's given 2 away in 1 season. So, there appears to be a collective issue. So, you started off mentioning Joe Gomez, but I mean, you can mention players right through the team who aren't playing to the standards we know they can do. And it may seem basic, but they look knackered to me. They don't look on it sort of physically or mentally. And I wouldn't want to question things like desire and attitude and things like that, because they've given us so much, this group. They've won us the league, they've won us the European Cup, they won us 2 trophies last season and won 92 points in the league. So to suggest there's some kind of drop off among their actual attitude, I can't see how that would just turn so quickly. I really can't. So it must be more fatigue. It maybe is a hangover from the fact that, they went so much for those 4 trophies last season and only ended up with the 2, and ended up with the 2 that, aren't top of the list, if we're all being honest. So I think all these factors coming together, plus the injuries, plus the fact that they didn't reinforce till really late in midfield, all of these things are coming together almost like a swirl of dirty water, if you like. And I think what's concerning is that, if you don't pull things together pretty soon, the season could disappear down the plug hole.
This Liverpool team, Gareth, I mean, we mentioned it at the top of the show today, like, they're known for their intensity, and yet the running stats that have come out across Twitter over the last number of days, quite concerning when you look at them in comparison to other Premier League teams, and also even comparison to Liverpool at the start of last season. Like, what can you put that down to? Like, you see some of the players maybe strolling around the pitch, and look, yeah, the cynic can maybe say it's an attitude thing, but maybe you're right. Like, maybe it is just a fatigue issue. Like, but it has to be concerning for Jurgen Klopp at this point.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we all know, don't we, that the motto from Pep Linders is intensity is our identity, and they've got that up on the wall around the club and things like that. But That hasn't been the case. And that's what I mean before about the basics. You can look at, you can expect poor form, you can expect injuries, but I don't think you expect to see a lack of intensity from Liverpool. But they are getting outran, they are getting outfought. And that's concerning. I mean, you look at last night and, within 40 seconds, Napoli have hit the post. Not long after, they've got a penalty and they're 1-0 up. And it's a pattern that keeps happening, that Liverpool are starting games really slow. That teams as well are starting to fancy themselves, which would be a concern for me. And I'm sure it's a concern for Liverpool as well. I mean, I'm not someone who likes to big up Everton for obvious reasons, but I expected Everton to sort of be in their shells, to defend the box, to fight for the ball, and to not be particularly expansive. But they looked like a side at the weekend that fancied themselves. And I think that's what we're seeing more and more now. I think, teams are looking at Liverpool and saying, well, I think we can get at them. I think we can get at the back line. I think we can get at them down Trent Alexander-Arnold's side. It's not the first choice midfield. The midfield hasn't got the legs of previous midfields, etc., etc., etc. And all these things are coming together, and it's just Liverpool are making it harder and harder for themselves as time is going on. It's only 2 wins out of 7 now this season. And look, you don't want to be overly dramatic and you don't want to write anything off and things like that, because it is still really early. Liverpool have got 2 home games now, Wolves at the weekend and then Ajax in the Champions League. 2 wins there would go a long way to making things feel a lot better. We've got people starting to return now from injury. I mean, Thiago comes on last night and his cameos, eye-opening really. He's putting in more challenges than in 27 minutes than the whole midfield did in the game previous to that, which tells you something. So I think he can have a real impact. Jota fit would have a real impact. But, some of the decisions right now, I think when I was on here the other week, I don't really understand why we're not playing Núñez at every point, really. You spent a lot of money on him. You need him to bed in. You need him to fit in with teammates. And to not be starting him last night, I thought was a bit of a strange one, because we know what Bobby Firmino can do. We know what he's capable of. But we need Núñez to bed in and fast. We need him scoring and fast. And one of my concerns when I'm watching Liverpool now is I'm not sure what a goal from them looks like. And what I mean by that is when we had the established front three, you saw patterns of play over and over again that other teams couldn't deal with that would result in Liverpool goals. At the moment, we seem to be relying on Diaz for magic to take 2 or 3 players on to get it to go outside and put it in the corner. And look, goals like that are fantastic to see, but they don't feel like systematic goals that are because everything's clicking. Because everything is not clicking. It's the opposite of clicking. It's unclicking right now for Liverpool.
The Salah fewer touches per game at the moment. The Athletic did their piece during the week. It feels like he's still touching the ball in the right areas, but just less. And that's not what you want. He's supposed to be one of the best footballers in the world, and he just isn't playing like it at the moment.
Yeah, he's oddly become sort of a creative player. I mean, I've seen something saying he's created some of the most chances in the league. He's right up there in terms of that particular stat, but that's not the one we want to see him top of the league of, if you like it. It is goal scoring. We know he can be fantastic in terms of winning games for Liverpool. And, he scored 40-odd goals in a season for Liverpool. So to not have him sort of in and around the box more than he is, it is a little bit confusing for me, particularly when, we had the red card for Núñez, the daft headbutt. He's out for 3 games. To me, I thought, why wouldn't you put Mo Salah through the middle there and get him on the ball more and get him in the box more and getting him in threatening areas more? If you look at his heat maps, obviously he's very much he's chalk on the boots almost at times on the right out there, and it feels like that's in readiness for linking with Núñez. But then Núñez is not even there last night, so I don't know. It looks a bit muddled. It looks a bit confusing. But it is a manager that brought us the league title for the first time in 30 years. It is a manager that's brought us a lot of good times. And, we just got to sort of keep it under for now. I know that, we're almost crisis club of choice right now, and that's how it's always going to be, particularly after, one of the heaviest defeat in Europe since 1966, I think it is. So that's not Liverpool. That's not Liverpool's identity. That's not what Liverpool are about. But very, very quickly, they need to find themselves. And, again, another concern from last night is you think at half time, a rocket goes up them. You know, you think that there's going to be teacups flying and all the rest of it, all the cliches. And then they come out and concede another one. And it's equally as daft as the previous ones that they've conceded. And you know, the goals, the manner of the goals, to just see Napoli playing simple 1-2s and see our defenders standing there like statues. You know, you can't help wondering what is going on right now.
Like, Gareth, it's probably very easy after last night, especially, to look at Joe Gomez and say, okay, quite easy to take him out of the starting team. Maybe you put Joel Matip in there automatically. Yeah. At what point, though, does the magnifying glass have to come down on Trent Alexander-Arnold? Because, you know, people often talk about his arrogance and the way he walks around the pitch, and he gets away with it, obviously, when he does things like he did against Bournemouth and finishes the ball off like that, and his attacking play is obviously excellent usually. But at what point does Jurgen Klopp have to really take a look at Trent and his really poor performances so far this season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're talking about it behind the scenes. You know, like any manager, really. What manager in the modern day would throw their player under the bus? There isn't many of them, because we know the headlines that it results in and the talk that it results in. But I'm sure behind the scenes, he can't be happy with some of that, because, as we've already said in this chat, it's basic stuff. It's not following your runner. It's not committing all out to being in a certain space at a certain time to try and deny the opposition. To just see him strolling around, you know, on 3 or 4 occasions and vital occasions that have ended up resulting in a goal. It's not the first time this season as well. You know, there was a goal earlier in the season where, you know, Milner's having a go at Van Dijk, but equally, you know, you wondered about Trent on that one as well. As you say, going the other way, you know, he is vital to Liverpool. You know, he can whip a superb ball in. His range of passing's unbelievable. He scored a great goal, as you mentioned, against Bournemouth. But it's got to be the full it. He's got to work hard first and foremost. They all have. They've got to track back. You know, this system with 3 in midfield, and with it not quite having the legs that it has on previous occasions, they've all got to work. And at the moment, as we've already said, opponents are working harder than them. And perhaps as well, you know, the gap's closing now. I mean, it always felt like that Liverpool were the fittest team in the league, essentially. However they were being set up behind the scenes, the training regimes and all the rest of it, it always felt that Liverpool could run and run and run and run forever. Now it feels like that gap's closed a bit, and that other teams are doing exactly the same thing. And you hear, you know, a lot of managers talking about counter pressing and pressing and all that kind of stuff. You know, that is now the de facto way that, you know, lots and lots of teams are setting up. So if they're just setting up, matching Liverpool or better than Liverpool in terms of heart desire, fight, running, etc., it could be simply one of those problems. So Liverpool have got to somehow get those levels back up. But the problem is as well, you know, going back to the injuries, you've got players there that look knackered, that look shattered, that can't run. You know, Fabinho for me is absolutely vital to Liverpool. He's the only one really who can play that spot in the squad. And he looks off it. He looks miles off it to me at the minute. You know, he's dangling out legs. He's in the sort of slipstream of attackers, and he's, you know, he's nowhere near them. He's not in the right place at the right time, which he always seemed to be in the past. He looks like someone who could do with the rest, but there's no one to come in and perform his role. Equally, Milner, you know, you wouldn't. Yes, he signed a new contract. Yes, he's staying around at Liverpool, but I wouldn't really expect them to be starting games. I'd expect them to be filling in. I'd expect them to be a break glass at times.
Yeah.
To see them starting games, but just tells you where we are right now.
I think that's really interesting, because the reason he's starting games is because they haven't signed enough players over the last couple of seasons. It's not just this transfer window. They have been very careful with their spending. Yeah. Now, they, you know, in fairness, when they identify a target, they go out and they get him, and we don't really hear much by way of build-up or months and months of speculation the way you do at other clubs, and they're to be commended for that. But the net spend is not what you would expect when you do have the best, if not one of the best managers in world football, and he is what's keeping Liverpool at the level they're at the moment. I don't think there's any doubt about that, you know. Like, he has taken players and turned them into global superstars by virtue of the coaching and the tactics and the approach. So, like, I don't know. The owners, it feels to me like the owners have not backed Klopp in a way that you should when you have such a genius in charge.
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, the signing of Arthur looks a bit panic. It looks a bit break glass. It looks a sort of, you know, that's the best that we could do because we left it so late. Thought it was interesting that the manager was, you know, so forthright almost in his answers about the midfield towards the end of the transfer window. He's normally someone who bats away any conversations around that. Indeed, he was doing earlier on in the year. But now he sort of seemed to be saying, well, yeah, I do need someone. And you know, we get in a lad on loan who, yeah, he could turn out to be great, but equally he hasn't played for 4 months. He comes on for a few minutes last night, and it's going to take, you know, a while for him to find his feet. Liverpool needed someone world class coming in who could pretty much hit the ground running, and they haven't got that, and they are now officially short. Anyone can see that, and it does seem like sometimes all the eggs go in one basket in terms of targets, and you know they obviously targeted Tchouameni. Is that how you say his name? I always get his name wrong. He goes to Real Madrid. And then it's like, well, what's the next option down the list then? I'm like you in that, you know, I know that they have the targets, they stick to it and they get them. And that's worked for them. Obviously, they did that with Van Dijk. They did that with Alisson and things like that. But I think in this particular situation, I think lots and lots of people were saying, but you've got Milner and you've got his age. You've got Henderson and his age and his form. You've got Naby Keita and his injury issues. Thiago and his injury issues. Oxlade-Chamberlain and his injury issues. You've got Curtis Jones, who's a young lad. Harvey Elliott, who's a young lad. Carvalho, who's come in, who's a young lad. So anyone could see it, really. And it's like, and even, I think another concern now is, you're looking at it and saying, well, the eggs now seem to be in the Bellingham basket for next summer. Well, one, what happens now? What happens between now and then? How low do Liverpool fall? What can they actually expect from this season going forward? But two, what if he decides not to come? What if someone else swoops in, offers him more money?
Real Madrid, like they've got, you know, they have space, and they will have space.
And we know that FSG, you know, will pull the plug on things if they think it gets too expensive. You know, we've seen them do that in the past. So, you know, that's got to be a worry. I don't doubt that there are other targets and other players on Liverpool's radar, and you know they have got better scouting systems and software and staff than anyone on the internet's got. So I'm sure that they've got plenty of people there, but they need to be 100% that these people are coming in, because if this is allowed to continue and there is an over reliance on players that can't be relied on essentially, then there's only one direction, isn't there, for Liverpool? And I think, you know, with Naby Keita, it's now finally been said that it's a serious hamstring issue. Now, he's a player that Liverpool have paid 50-odd million for and should be a player right now who you can call on. Okay, you can't really call him out. It's an injury. Injuries happen. But it's a regular issue for Liverpool, or for me as a Liverpool fan looking in at it, that he's not been there at the times when Liverpool need him. And frankly, you need the players to be there at those times.
I think you mentioned the word forthright there, Gareth, when you're talking about Jurgen Klopp, and like even listening to his comments after the match last night, talking about, I think we need to reinvent ourselves almost. Like, have you noticed, as someone who has watched Jurgen Klopp's demeanour, over a long period of time since he's taken over at the club, have you noticed a shift in the way he has carried himself, a shift in his demeanour over the last, well, I guess this season especially? Like, has that changed ever so slightly?
I mean, it's difficult to say, isn't it? Because, you know, anyone can see that it's gone wrong this season so far. You know, it's not the plan to win 2 out of 7. It's not the plan to draw at Fulham and draw at Everton and get battered by Napoli last night. So quite clearly in those situations, he's going to be asked more difficult questions. You know, he's asked about his job last night, which I find surprising. But, you know, if he therefore ends up getting touchy about that, well, he's a passionate man. He's an emotional man, and we like that about him. By the way, you know that is a good side of Jurgen Klopp, and it's something that suits the Liverpool job. We want to see someone who's passionate about managing Liverpool. But the bit that got me, like I say, is just that he was quite open about the fact that he seemed to want someone. He didn't really say who. He said he wanted a body. He wanted someone in midfield, and that's essentially what happened in the end with the loan signing. But that felt to me a little bit like when they left it all window, and then eventually went and got Kabak and got Davis, who never even played for Liverpool in the first team. So, you know, that's not good planning. That's not good thinking. That's not a good way to operate. And I think one of the questions a minute ago was, you know, that seems to have been the case now for a few windows. And it's this conservative approach, stroke gambling almost on, you know, Klopp's genius, if you like, I think is starting to fail a little bit, and he needs to be backed. He needs to be backed by the owners. They need to find money down the back of the couch, whatever it might be. They need to go and buy top-class players, because that's happened before and it's worked.
Yeah,
Alisson,
exactly.
top-class player,
That's
worked.
it.
Van Dijk, top-class player, worked.
Yeah.
So, you've got to go and do that again. And to say someone like, I like Curtis Jones, I think he's a talented lad. I love seeing a lad come through the ranks and things like that. But to be calling on him right now and say, go and fix the midfield, Curtis, well, quite clearly not. That you can't do that. You can say that to someone like Thiago. And like I say, he was transformational almost last night. Straight away, you see someone on the front foot, taking people on in midfield, putting in more tackles. He looked fresh. And I'm really looking forward now to seeing him against Wolves at the weekend. But imagine we had one more of his ilk, one more of his standard, someone who could deputise for Fabinho as well, and get him fresh, get him fired, and get him to the level where he should be. That's what should be there, and that's what should be there now. And it's missing. And you have to say, well, it's on recruitment.
Can I just ask you one last one, Gareth, for me? Just on the safety advice handed out by Liverpool to the fans heading over to Naples for this match. And looking on Twitter last night, I saw some strange videos of Liverpool fans trying to get on to coaches and being asked for, I think, someone with a handheld camera taking photographs of them. And I know there's probably a lot of Liverpool fans, Irish Liverpool fans, watching this morning and listening this morning who maybe were over and coming home from the game. Did you anecdotally hear of anything strange on the ground? Like, it was probably fairly unique in itself to have that official safety advice coming through the club as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a fuss over that safety advice, which I didn't really understand, I've got to be honest, because it got turned into, well, isn't Liverpool a threat to people coming over here, and isn't the crime in Liverpool, and all this sort of whataboutery. But the advice was built on how Liverpool have experienced things when they've been to Naples in the past. So, I've got friends who've been attacked in Naples in the past, and they're not hooligans. They're not people who go looking for trouble. They're in bars, they're in restaurants, they're enjoying the city, and you've got groups of people turning up and targeting them. Now, I don't know of that going on in Liverpool. I'm not saying Liverpool is a crime-free city, of course it isn't, but if that was going on in Liverpool, I wouldn't have a problem with a club that was coming here telling their fans that they need to be careful. And that's what Liverpool did. And it was built on evidence. It was built on not only fans, by the way, being targeted, but journalists covering the club in the past as well have been targeted when they've gone over to Naples. So, this how dare they say something, I didn't really understand. And yeah, as you mentioned, some very concerning treatment of them last night, and being photographed and showing up their ID and the ticket, and that before they're allowed to get on a bus that takes them to the ground. I mean, what society are we living in here? This is people going to a football match. Going to a football match is not a crime. Being a Liverpool fan is not a crime. Being from this country is not a crime, and yet you're treated there as though you've committed one. And that is wrong, and that should be called out. And I know Spirit of Shankly have already said there's they're speaking to the Football Supporters Association in Europe. I've probably got that name wrong, but it's a body that represents fans in Europe. There's a conversation already going on there. But in any way possible, particularly after what happened in Paris, this type of behaviour by police forces and authorities abroad should be challenged. And you wait for, where are they in this? Naples has got a reputation around how fans visiting that city are treated. So where's the sanctions from UEFA around that? When do we say, well, if you can't control that situation, the match has to be played elsewhere? And as I say, going back to the whataboutery around it, I don't remember that ever being the case at Liverpool. I don't ever remember people saying that's an unsafe city to visit as an away fan. So I was absolutely fine with the advice that was issued by Liverpool, because it was the right advice, and it was proven how they were treated over there that it was the right advice.
Gareth, we'll leave it there for now. Plenty more to talk about over the coming weeks. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers, fellas. Thank you.
That's Gareth Roberts there. You can follow him on Twitter for your Liverpool takes and info and information and discussion. It's 8:44 this morning. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Now, the Premier League is back. We've teamed up with one of Europe's largest sports events ticketing and hospitality companies, Champions Travel, to give you the opportunity to win a €250 Champions Travel voucher every day this week. They can be used on Premier League match trips as well as a host of other sporting events. Daily winners will be entered into our grand prize draw, where one lucky winner will win a trip from a selection of Premier League games with flights and 2 nights accommodation included. To enter, tell us who this man is explaining his tactics against Darwin Núñez.
And what I was hoping to do is, like Anna said before, I was hoping he was going to hit me. And
You can tweet us your guess on our main Twitter account, which is @OffTheBall. Who's this?
And what I was hoping to do is, like Anna said before, I was hoping he was going to hit me. And
a pint of wine. 8:44 this morning. Cameron Hill is with us, talking a little bit of tennis. Colin Buig's not here, so you're subbing in for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Ger. Good morning, Shane.
What's going on?
Well, Carlos Alcaraz, he's through. He's into the semi-finals. Absolutely brilliant match at Flushing Meadows this morning. Finished about an hour or so ago. Really excellent game, really excellent match. Taking on Yannick Sinner in the quarter-final. Went to 5 sets. He won the first set 6-3, 7-5, 7-5 for Sinner. Sinner had match point in the 4th set before Carlos Alcaraz came back and classily finished it off.
So Alcaraz obviously is the rising star in tennis on hard court, and up to Wimbledon had been like, ooh, when's he going to win? What's the breakthrough going to be? Now he's in the semi-final?
Yeah, absolutely. He's the youngest Grand Slam semi-finalist since Nadal in 2005, and the youngest US Open finalist or semi-finalist since Pete Sampras in 1990.
All right, you're firmly in the Carlos Alcaraz fan club. I can sense every time you talk about him, you get a little bit excited.
We need some new stars.
Well, 100%. The men's game especially needs them, but like I saw one of the points on Twitter this morning, kind of it was a very Nick Kyrgios-esque shot, returning a serve from behind his own body, but he pulls those kind of shots out, doesn't he? Like he's an exciting player, not just a player that gets results.
Yeah, he is. Like, I think the problem with him, and he's very exciting to watch, and really he dug it out today, really did, and had some excellent forehands, brilliant shots. I think the problem with him is he wants every shot to be a winner. You can see it in the way he hits the ball and strikes it. It's got to be there. There's a real grit and power behind it. It reminds me of Agassi talked about it in his book Open, that he wanted every shot to be a winner when he was younger, and then was told, just hit it over the net the first. They don't all have to be winners. And I think that's probably the last bit of his game that he needs to round off, that you just need the rhythm. You knew Sinner was being very patient, and I felt on a different day he might have snatched it.
Casper Ruud is also one of those players who is primed to be a Grand Slam winner over the next couple of years, right? He's like he's Norwegian. He's the first good Norwegian tennis player, really.
Yeah.
Not to like cast aspersions on all that have come before him, but he's the best they've ever had. And so, like, Sinner also is somebody who I think has kind of come into the consciousness because he had a good Wimbledon. So Sinner, Alcaraz and Ruud are all players who we will see a lot of in coming years. But TFO is a guy who I think not many of us had heard of really before, like certainly going as deep as he was a straight sets winner into the semi-finals. He's an American. He's up against Alcaraz in the semi. So I've noted, and his sort of backstory seems to be pretty amazing. Not from a tennis family, not from a tennis stronghold. His dad was a caretaker, and here he is winning the most money he's ever going to win in his life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really young semi-final, like Final Four. So obviously you've Alcaraz, who's 19, Francis Tiafoe, who's 24, who dispatched of Rafa Nadal in the round of 16. Casper Ruud, who's 23, and then Karen Khachanov, who's the elder statesman there at 26. So it's really, really young, really exciting. I'd love to see a Ruud Alcaraz final. I think Alcaraz, just seeing him in a Grand Slam final at this stage would be great. Whereas Ruud, you feel he was in the French Open final, and I think he was very starstruck by Rafa Nadal, because Rafa Nadal just wiped the court with him. So it'd be great to see those two. Or, I mean, Tiafoe Alcaraz is going to be a massive semi-final as well.
Okay, all right, so that's the crack. That's the story with the men's. The women's semis, are we at women's semi-final stage?
Yeah. Coco Gauff gone. I was really on the Coco Gauff bandwagon and hype train for this one, but
yeah, a lot were. Caroline Garcia dispatched of her, and I think some people think she's going to be the dark horse for this one. I think it's going to be Swiatek. She's Sabalenka in this semi-final, and Sabalenka's grand, but she does the basics and she'll work hard, but I think Swiatek just has that X factor when she wants it. She's inconsistent, obviously, but I think it's her slam this time.
All right.
Sabalenka using the not being allowed to play in Wimbledon to her advantage. She's kind of using that, I guess, unwantedness in terms of, to use a terrible word for it, but like the fact that these Russian and Belarusian players weren't allowed to play in Wimbledon, it's clearly motivated someone like Sabalenka.
Yeah, it kind of has. Now, you'd think, I mean, Rublev was really annoyed, and he got to the quarterfinals. He was very, very annoyed that he couldn't play Wimbledon, and said that it wasn't really properly done, the way they were kind of just discarded, cast off to the side. But yeah, Sabalenka's definitely someone who would use that and love something that'll give her a bit of an edge and a bit of a spike.
Right, good stuff, Cameron. Thanks for that. Colin will resume normal service on Monday when he'll tell us, I told you all that whoever wins was going to win. It's 8:49 this morning. If you want to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream as well. Now, we are turning our attention to the Grand Prix this weekend. This is
a little bit of Monza action. This is the one that I so last year I went to the Spa Grand Prix in Belgium, which was the week before Monza. Made the absolute horrific decision of going to Spa when it was rained out, and then the following week in the sun in Monza, my favourite driver Daniel Ricciardo goes and wins it.
Why would you pick to go to Belgium instead of Italy? What possessed you?
Because the rain usually makes it a very exciting race in Spa.
Right.
In the middle of the Ardennes forest, you get plenty of rain, but an absolute howler of a decision.
Italy, like the
I know.
nicest part of the world to go and visit.
Hindsight is 20/20, Ger.
Even the bad petrol stations have the nicest pizza you've ever had.
See, I'd imagine Jess McFadyen wouldn't have made that terrible call, but I unfortunately did.
Jess, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I would choose both. So I'm lucky enough that I've been to both, and they are both great for different reasons. But you're right. Last year was a bad choice. Sorry.
Still not over it.
What's going to happen this weekend?
Well, if Max carries on his current form, it could be another Max victory, and I think it'll be his 5th in a row. So I think it's going to be pretty hard to stop Max on his current run of form. He's looking unstoppable this season.
It was funny last weekend, Jess, at Zandvoort, where like we haven't really seen the Hamilton-Verstappen rivalry at all this season, and really last weekend was probably the closest they've come since Yas Marina last year. It was great to see Hamilton pushing him, and obviously ultimately Verstappen overtook him and won the race, but it was nice to get that little bit of nostalgia for that little rivalry last weekend.
It was. Whether you called it nostalgia or PTSD, I guess it depends on how you felt last year went. But yeah, it was great. It was great to see a competitive Mercedes package, because, Ferrari seemed to just keep dropping the ball. So that it was good to have at least two drivers pushing Max. Unfortunately, it didn't go their way, but it was great. And, we had some really interesting strategy plays. There was a lot for us to kind of unpick following when the checkered flag dropped. There was loads for us to be asking, like, why did you make that decision? And, why did you put Russell on softs and leave Hamilton out there exposed? And obviously that's where Max got him at the safety car restart. So last weekend was great. It was, I can't believe we're talking about being surprised that Mercedes are competitive, but hey, that's 2022.
It's funny that Verstappen pretty much all but mathematically has the title race sewn up, and yet does it become a point now, Jess, where he turns his attention to records? I think that was his 10th win maybe last weekend, and Schumacher and Vettel have the record jointly on 13 race wins in one season. So it's going to become the kind of Cristiano Ronaldo individual records kind of question now for Max. Surely he's out to get these records.
Do you know what? When you ask him about records, even about championships, after winning last year, he said, I've completed F1 now. I don't really need to win another title. I'll always be a world champion. So he's not really that fussed about records. I think he's one of those drivers that, probably a nice to have, but it's not really on his hit list. He just wants to go out there and win. And if that means that he then beats somebody's record, then yeah, all right. But he's very lackadaisical about those things, which is quite funny. I think we get more excited about them than he does. But yeah, if he wins in Monza, he could have this title wrapped up by Japan. So that's another 2 races time. So yeah, it's kind of, especially after how close last season was, a bit disappointing that we could have the title wrapped up and not really anything to get excited about anymore than maybe the constructors. But for people watching, it's the drivers is the more important championship. So it's a bit of a shame, but it just goes to show how right Max and Red Bull have had it this year, and they will be, especially again dependent on how you saw last season play out, this season they will be undoubtedly very deserving champions.
It's a very important point to make, that like most people are very into the Drivers' Championship as opposed to the Constructors, and yet obviously the teams really value that. But to that crossover appeal that we've talked about consistently over the last 18 months, where the casual fan is now tuning in, you don't want these processions where we know in advance who's going to win the big prize at the end. So I guess a lot of the conversation at the moment is about next year and making sure that there is going to be a proper competition for the Drivers' Championship. What's your feeling about what next year will actually look like on the basis of what we're seeing at the moment?
I think, we had such a massive regulation change at the start of the season. And if you look back through the history books, which for casual fans, new fans, I would definitely say go and do, because you learn a lot. But we usually get this sense where one team ordinarily will just nail it, and they will have a very, very strong season that can often be as runaway as it has been this year. With Mercedes, we had it for multiple seasons. Now, I'm not sure that's going to happen next year. At least the optimist in me doesn't think that maybe is going to be. We're not going into another period of one team dominant. I think we are still going to be having higher competitiveness, because for all of Ferrari's maybe blunders this season, they have a very strong car. So if they can learn from this season, tidy up a little bit the internal problems that they've had going on, that maybe they're not as on it as Red Bull are in terms of in race moments, we could be having, they could be coming back stronger for sure. And Mercedes, you cannot say that they won't have the investment and the wherewithal to go away and go, right, we got the beginning of the season completely wrong. How do we come back and make sure that doesn't happen? They're pretty confident that they know what is wrong, and over the winter break they'd be able to fix it. So if we've got 3 teams in it next year, properly in it, 6 drivers properly in it, then that's a recipe for greatness. So I'm almost like, I'm going to let this season lie, just because of what a massive change it was, and for everybody to have come out and got it right. I don't think that's ever happened when we've had a regulation change. So let's leave 2022 as for what it was and for what it is, and definitely get excited about next season.
Just on Ferrari, Jess, that you mentioned there, promised so much at the start of the season. I think they won 2 of the first 3 races, and you're thinking, right, this is going to be great. Like, some of their strategy calls have been absolutely ridiculous, and even some of the basic errors in operation, like for anyone watching last weekend, I think it was Carlos Sainz's first pit stop where they put 3 wheels on the car, and you're just sitting there watching, pretty sure the car needs 4 wheels. Some little moments like that where Ferrari have just been all at sea. I know, like, this is obviously their home race at Monza this weekend. The pressure goes up more than just a notch. Talk of a new rear wing for them as well, to try and maybe catch up to that pace of the Red Bulls. But the pressure is really on them this weekend, Jess.
It is, but they're also used to losing in Monza. So, Charles Leclerc is the most recent Ferrari winner. Back in 2019, I think he won there. It was great for them. It was amazing, but it was the first time that they'd won in, I can't remember how many years, but it'd been a very long time since they'd had, I think Fernando Alonso was the last winner in a Ferrari at Monza. So they're kind of used to it being this, it's called the cathedral of motorsport, and it is absolutely probably one of the, I've not been able to go to Zandvoort yet since it's come back, and everybody says what an amazing atmosphere it is there, but Monza I have been to, and it is, the Tifosi are incredibly passionate for Ferrari, and you do feel like if you are not wearing red, you do feel very noticeable, but it's a great place, and I think the passion hasn't waned. At least I hope it won't have done this year, even though I'm sure Tifosi are a bit disappointed, just given how promising the start of the season was. But yeah, pressure's on. They're also, it's a big celebration for them. They're celebrating 75 years of Ferrari. They've got a celebration livery. They've brought a bit of the Modena yellow to the car. They'll be wearing yellow race suits. So, they're still celebrating it, even if maybe on track. They definitely don't think that they've got the right package to be super competitive in Monza. It's, such high speed, and they just don't think that they've got the right package to be able to compete with the speed of Red Bull. So, yeah, it's probably going to be one where they turn up. They'll be happy if they end up on the podium. That would be enough, I think, for the Tifosi and for Ferrari, especially given how much they've missed out this season, or the last few races anyway as well. So yeah, I think it will just be one of those ones that I'll be like, it's great, but let's skip it quickly.
Are you
moving on?
Are you reading anything into how pissed off Lewis Hamilton was last weekend? Is that just because he's competitive and so therefore that's all we should expect, or is it he's so pissed off because he's got so few opportunities left to win, or he's so pissed off because he was actually so close to winning and so therefore, proving that the car could be competitive next season? Any of these sound plausible?
Yeah, I think probably the latter. It was so unexpected. They were pretty confident that they could be competitive in Zandvoort, and before we went into qualifying, we thought, oh, maybe Mercedes are going to have a shoe in at challenging Max at least, and it was really tight for qualifying, but unfortunately Mercedes weren't quite up there. So the fact that they were able to then go really ballsy on strategy, and have them at a point where all of a sudden we're like, they could win this now. Like they've nailed this strategically, and then it's F1. So if you get a VSC, a virtual safety car, or a safety car thrown at the wrong time for you, all of that hard work just falls away, and that's essentially what happened with Lewis. And I think Lewis, we were talking about records earlier. He is a driver who has won a race in every season that he's competed in. And 2022 looks like maybe that's going to be the first time he doesn't. So I think it was very emotional. He said, the reason why he was so upset was because he knows how hard every single person in the Mercedes team is working to get the team back up there where it feels like it belongs. And to not be able to deliver on a win for them, I think he took that very hard. He's a very emotional driver. He gets very affected by that, and I think he thought that Mercedes maybe threw it away. But in the heat of the moment, especially when the driver can only see what's going on in front of them, they can't see what's going on elsewhere on track. They only get the information their engineers giving them. I think in the heat of the moment, of course, he was really upset. Of course, he was very, very disappointed. And afterwards, when he spoke, he explained why. He said it was just because it was so disappointing that we were so close. We've been working so hard and we have nothing to show for it. I mean, Russell got P2, which was great. I mean, I thought his own personal strategy calls were spot on. He's really proving to be a very, very formidable driver in all aspects, including calling his own strategies, which is what you want, really. But yeah, I think it's pure disappointment, because we don't know when they're going to get another shot. Again, they're probably not going to be very competitive around Monza. So, when is that opportunity going to arise again where they could potentially take a win home? I don't know if that's going to happen. So, yeah, I think it was just super, super a disappointment.
It's almost hard to believe, Jess, that Daniel Ricciardo won at Monza last year, given all that's happened to him this year. And I know that was McLaren's first win in a decade, I think, almost. And like, when you look at what's happened this season, even for Ricciardo last week at Zandvoort, I mean, qualifying 10 places behind your teammate bruises the ego somewhat. And then, of course, finishing, I think, second last of the cars that finished. Like, at the minute, he doesn't have a seat for 2023, Daniel Ricciardo, which will come as a disappointment to all, even neutral Formula One fans.
Yeah.
Is he at the moment now playing for a place on the grid next season? And like, are there any teams that you think, I know Haas was rumoured at one point, but where do you think he ends up next season? Is he in danger of not being on the grid whatsoever?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. I think he genuinely is, well, multi-million-dollar question when it comes to driver salaries. But more and more, I'm thinking he's going to take a year out and not be on the grid next season, which I know would be a big blow for a lot of people. But the problem is with Daniel, he's moved now. This is his third team in Formula One, and fourth team technically, but if you count Toro Rosso, but obviously that was in the Red Bull family. There's not really many other places that he can go, and he has said he wants to be competitive. Now, you mentioned Haas. Haas is an interesting prospect because they look like potentially they're going to get some an injection of investment in the form of that they've been whispering about getting a headline sponsor. Hopefully nothing like a Rich Energy again. We need to or a Carly. They kind of need a headline sponsor that's not going to cause them some problems. But if they do get an injection, it is a good team, and it could be a place that builds itself around Daniel. because of his experience, because he is a proven multiple race winner, not just Monza, he won at Red Bull as well. But that feels like a very, very long time ago. It could be a good move for him, but what he doesn't want to end up in is kind of like tootling around in the midfield and not within a sniff of a win ever. McLaren, whilst yes, we mentioned like he's not got on very well. We were talking about Lando Norris. He's due a win. And with McLaren last season, especially, he almost did win in Russia. So it's McLaren you wouldn't count as a tootling midfield team. It is competitive and can take advantage of opportunities when the top three kind of miss out. But I don't think he really wants to. I don't think he wants, like, the Haas move doesn't sound sexy to him. So I think we'll have to see. My money's on him taking time out and seeing how the grid shuffles out in future and talking to teams about another drive. But yeah, he's running out of options now, and it looks like he can't go back to Alpine, Renault, where he was before. It looks like they are dead set on Gasly if Red Bull can negotiate Colton Herta, the IndyCar driver. If he can get a super license, they want to bring him in to replace Gasly at AlphaTauri, but that's whether or not the FIA will make an exemption for him, because he currently doesn't have enough super license points, even though he's done very, very well in IndyCar. So, I mean, it's been amazing kind of chess play here. In terms of silly season, it's been really interesting to work out. But yeah, when the music stops, there might not be any seats left for Daniel to jump into. So we could be looking at a grid without Ricciardo's name on it next year.
Yeah, scary prospect. I mean, and just a final one for me, Jess. The Oscar Piastri mess finally over to some degree, and he will drive for McLaren next year. But it's kind of set a precedent in some ways, and just interesting reading some of the comments, especially from Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team principal, where he said George Russell and Esteban Ocon, we financed them a long way on, and of course the insinuation here being that if you finance a driver, of course they should maybe repay you when it comes to being a Formula 1 driver on the grid. And he said, to know now a precedent has been set that if you are clever you can manoeuvre yourself out of something that's clearly not good for the industry, so we will employ even more lawyers for even stricter contracts. Like it's you feel like it's going to change the sport, this Oscar Piastri mess, and it's maybe not going to go away anytime soon.
I think that's, I mean, I understand where Toto's coming from, of course, because, you know, as he said, these young driver programs, they invest a lot of money in young talent in order to secure the future of the team by having great drivers on their roster. But if you look at the timeline of what happened with Oscar, I actually do not blame the kid one iota of what he did. Alpine just did not show any forthcoming in terms of locking him in a proper contract. If you look at what actually he signed, it was so vague. It just said, yeah, we'll put you in an F1 seat at some point. Now, he's already been sat waiting in the sidelines for Alpine to decide what it's going to do. And the agreement that he was November 2021 is when he signed this vague terms sheet, and he was promised within 10 days he would have a reserve driver contract and an F1 driver contract that would detail where he would end up at what stage. And it took months. I think it was 3 months, 4 months until it actually materialized. And by which point it was still too vague, and the Alpine just delayed to the point where they ended up sending the terms sheet to the contract recognition board, which is what you have to do for every contract you have with a driver. You have to send the contract off to the CRB, and it was just so vague that when it came to eventually talking to McLaren, because by that point they'd been waiting patiently, nothing materializing, and then essentially what they were shown was, you're not going to be racing with Alpine until at least 2025, and we're going to stick you in a Williams. And that's not what Oscar wanted, or that's not what Oscar agreed, and his management team agreed with Alpine. And so what turned out was that he then decided to go and speak to other teams, which I think, you know, I'm not an F1 driver or a F2 driver, but to be left hanging like that by the team that said, you know, it's going to invest in you, it's going to bring you up, it's going to put you in a seat. You know, what is Oscar going to do in the meantime? He's not going to have any bum in seat time, which for a driver is so crucial. So I actually don't. I understand what Toto's saying, and I think having proper contracts, yes, that is the key here to not having something similar happen to another team. But it's kind of all on Alpine, and not doing that properly. So yes, cool, get more lawyers, write better contracts, but also don't expect your junior drivers to sit and wait when they have such a loose contract agreement anyway. So it's been fascinating for sure. I've often said sometimes, even when we talk about stewarding decisions, it sometimes feels a bit more like a court of law than it does, say, a football match where a referee just decides. But yeah, this has really been a courtroom drama. I can't wait for the Netflix coverage of it, because if they've got any kind of background stuff on it, it will be explosive. So yeah, I think I don't think it's fair to say it set a precedent. I think just get your contracts in order, make sure they're watertight, and don't leave young talent, which everybody on the grid agrees he's wonder talent. Hence why McLaren took the risk with him. Don't leave them hanging.
All right, Jess, great stuff as ever. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thanks so much. Bye.
It's Jess McFadyen there. You can get us on 0879 180 180. That's the WhatsApp number, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. It's competition time. Premier League is back. We've teamed up with one of Europe's largest sports events ticketing and hospitality companies, Champions Travel, to give you the opportunity to win a €250 Champions Travel voucher every day this week. They can be used on Premier League match trips, as well as a host of other sporting events. Daily winners will also be entered into a grand prize draw, where one lucky winner will win a trip from a selection of Premier League games with flights and 2 nights accommodation included. Tell us who this is, explaining his tactics against Darwin Núñez.
And what I was hoping to do was, like Anna said before, I was hoping he was going to hit me. And
you can tweet us your guess on our main Twitter account, @OffTheBall. Up next, we're going to talk to Jamie Walt. We're also going to hear a little bit from Kenny Cunningham. Quick break after this.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Off the ball.
It's been ruled out. Richarlison's goal. This is the pain of VAR. 2-1 now to Fulham. 5 minutes of stoppage time. We're in the 92nd minute at the moment. Shane Duffy, I don't think it's got on.
He got booked as well for taking his jersey off for Charlton. I mean, the ultimate pain of getting booked for a goal is disallowed because you took your top off. I mean, imagine if that booking cost them later in the season.
Yeah, I can't imagine Lara did that in the 80s, to be honest.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts, and download the OTB Sports app.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong. Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good. But this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD branches nationwide. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Kenny Cunningham, any interest in the Bose job? Definitive yes or no answer to this one, please.
Definitive.
Are you a dark horse for the Bose job? Or?
The Bose.
We're on air, Kenny.
Oh, sorry. I thought that was an off-air comment.
No.
Who wouldn't be interested in the Bose job? Let's be honest.
Seriously though,
look at that stature.
You've had ambitions before.
I thought this was Champions League night.
It is Champions League.
Oh, it is Champions League. All right, sorry. You're diverting, are you?
You've champions. You've had management ambitions before. Your name has been touted.
You're just talking off the top of your head now. We've never had a conversation about my managerial ambitions before.
I heard your name.
Making a massive presumption.
I heard your name massively
just
connected with.
But you know who you remind me of? That Bet Rigby on Sky News, just storing it up. Prime Minister's question time. Or shouting and screaming at Boris Johnson. He's leaving number 10. She's shouting and screaming from about 20 yards away. That's what you're attempting to do now.
I'm going to issue a come and get me plea to Sky News. If you're not going to issue a come and get me plea to Bose.
Or is it to the electorate? Well, that took a bit of a tangent. Who wouldn't be interested is what I took from it.
Up the Bowers.
Yeah.
That was the other thing I took, yeah.
Well,
Kenny and Form.
Yeah, I mean, look, you would have said he was closer to Shells geographically, but maybe mentally he's closer to Bowes. And wouldn't it be interesting?
Charismatic manager, Kenny Cunningham. I'd certainly play for him.
Wouldn't it be interesting? OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Now, the Underdogs are back. And this, I don't know if you've all been fans of the TG Carr show, but it really helped Kieran Donaghy cement his place on the Kerry football team. That's how long it's been going, all the way back. I don't know, is that 2 decades or so? That was the football. They've done hurling, they've done women's football, they've done camogie, and they're back to hurling. And I'm delighted to say Jamie Wall is going to be one of the selectors this year, and he joins us now. Jamie, Conas Atall too.
Ma, Ger, agus tú féin.
Cuisac ma.
Nice.
Tá mé beagnach críochnathe leis an Gaeilge, beagnach sé sin atá agumsa. Agus tú féin.
Yeah, on will post all our good.
Neil post ar bet ag lorga gum. How is your Irish? Have you had to do a quick refresher course in it, or maybe you're flourishing the whole time?
Some bit, yeah, not too bad. Like I'd speak a bit Mam at home a bit here, and I've obviously been doing a small bit with GABO as well, so that has kept it some bit sharp. But even to be honest, like when we do the camps and we go in and you meet John Allen and he's straight away just bang Irish the whole time, it kind of takes me about a few hours to kind of get up to speed with himself and Claire O'Connor. They'd be a bit better than I am at it, so but it's great. I actually really enjoyed that side of the whole thing, actually, just coming away from the weekends, just kind of thinking, God, I've actually used my Irish for a couple of days here, so that even that in itself for me has been great.
I was going to say, because there's a period in all our lives where we're like, oh Jesus, I really wish I could speak better Irish, and my kids going to school over the last couple of years, it's definitely brought it back to me. I'm like, I can't understand why I didn't do more about this. So you have the opportunity not alone to like have good crack on telly, watching some of the best underdog hurlers in the country, but also kind of just re-immerse yourself in your own culture.
Big time, yeah. Like that's just a bit of it. That's kind of like a nearly an unintended consequence that I really enjoyed. Like, is just getting to actually use your Irish again, flat out, and that's what it is, Ger. Realistically, like you said, the kids are bringing it home now, so you're kind of using it that bit more. Like, and it's the same for everyone. Like, it's just pure practice. Like, it's a language thing. Like with any language, if you don't use it, you get out of the habit of it. Like, no matter how good or bad you are at it. Like, so. That side of it is a nice thing, and I think it's one of the big things I suppose about TG Carr, like that I've always enjoyed, is that when you're watching the league and the club games and the underage games, that you do find you're stuck in the language and you pick things up quite quickly. Like, I mean, I know lots of people who don't have loads of Irish, but they seem to understand the TG Carr commentary, because they always say to me like, oh, you said such and such about this fella, like, and I'm kind of like, she said, I didn't know you had Irish. And it's like, oh no, well, they have it then, like, so it certainly sharpens the blade for people a bit.
You'll have to learn the couple of swear words as well, Jamie, the couple of fuckle on the sideline to really hammer home your instructions. That's probably another part of it.
I think I'm better off actually not knowing them. If I don't know them, I can't say them, at least.
You've got there's a strong Cork flavour there. You mentioned John Allen, like that probably makes you feel a little bit more at home as well. It's there's always Cork lads everywhere, proper order, I'm sure you will say.
Big time, yeah. Look, to be honest with you, like for me, probably one of the main attractions with the whole thing is getting involved with somebody like John Allen. Like, he's Ger, you were talking about the last how long the Underdogs is going on, but like I was thinking how long it is since Cork won an All-Ireland, that it's actually John Allen was the last All-Ireland winning manager for us back in 2005. So as a Cork person, obviously, like, getting to just be in his presence and listen to him and learn from someone like him it's been unreal, to be honest with you. Even like I just find sitting with him at lunch sometimes and just you just actually sit back and you're like consciously in your head, it's like, I'm going to shut up here for 5 minutes and just listen to this man, because he's very much a kind of a understated, but like kind of that wisdom kind of, it really just flows from him. Like, so I really have just enjoyed just sitting back and shutting my mouth for 5 minutes, to be honest with you, and listening to him.
One of the things that has also kind of made me fall in love again with the language is just how brilliant it is at capturing certain things. And what you're talking about, John Allen, he's a C in the Irish. Like, that's when you talk about him, I'm kind of, that's what, and I don't know if you have an English word that's the same. That's like wise man, gentle, somebody you would follow, somebody you need to listen to and suck the knowledge out of. It's too many words, but he's a C. And what is that like? Because we need more John Allens in our lives.
Well, like for me, like we'll say, even on a personal sense, like, just like I obviously have my eyes on management and coaching and that whole journey, and it is very much a journey. Like, and you see, like John, who's kind of has kind of gone through the journey, we'll say, and has learned so much in it. Like, and so for me, like, you just someone like him, you straight away are gravitate towards him. But like, I think it's even just like he's just very interested in people. I think, like, he's a former principal. Like, he's massive. It's like I reckon hurling is his second favorite thing, to be honest with you. Like, it's traditional music is his favorite thing, really. Like, and he talks to Claire and myself about music nearly as much as hurling. Like, and he's interested in old music, new music. I was at Arctic Monkeys last week in Spain, and he was sending me messages for the Monkeha Arctic and asking about this, and sent me a message even saying that their performance at Reading and Leeds was on BBC. Like, and I'm kind of like, how do you know all of this about everything? Like we're not even talking about hurling, and you're putting me to shame. Like, so, like, just to be honest with you, like, you just sit and listen to him, whatever the topic is, and he's had such he's seen so much in the world. Like, obviously they got those amazing holidays with Cork back when they were in All-Ireland finals and that, but like, even with the whole Limerick, he was involved with Limerick obviously as well in 2013 and that, so like, he's been out to JP's fabled parts of the world, we'll hear kind of stories about the Limerick lads getting out and that, and like, he's seen so much of the world, he's seen so much of life in that like, you'd be a fool not to be kind of just sitting there kind of listening to the likes of, like you said, John Allen's in our lives. Like, and it's just great for me and for the players that are involved, and for Claire, and for all of us, and even for the production crew. Like, I know for a fact that some of them are sitting there just listening to John as well. Like, and it's just to get to work with someone like that has that kind of that just worldly experience and kind of knowledge and wisdom, I think, is a better word even than knowledge. Like, it's been great.
It's funny, Jimmy, you talk about John being more interested nearly in people, and like we were talking earlier about Graham Potter, the Brighton manager, being interested in emotional intelligence, and probably similar thing as well, people, and having interests outside of your chosen sport. Like, for you, when you're as you say, sitting there over the lunch table, like, have you always been that kind of manager where you're nearly soaking everything up like a sponge, and maybe taking tidbits from different managers you watch, the Codys and whomever else? Like, are you one of those kind of learn by listening sort of managers that picks little bits up here and there?
I probably hadn't been. It might be one of the big things I've learned in all this, is that I need to be more like that. Probably spent too much time talking and not enough time listening, and it's something that I've just definitely picked up from being in the presence of someone like John, is that sometimes you need to just shut your mouth and open your ears, like, and it's something that hasn't done me any harm in the last couple of weeks and months. But like, look, like you're talking about the likes of Cody's, like, these guys that are legendary figures. Like, I had the pleasure of meeting Brian once before, and he had a very different kind of aura, but it was similarly kind of almost like you can't stay, like, kind of, like in the Lord of the Rings, like, I know that's back in vogue, like, where you're just staring into the ring, like, you're just drawn to this presence, and like, there's just certain people that draw you to their presence, like, and maybe John Allen is more of a Gandalf figure. I don't know who you actually characterize Cody as, but it's that kind of, people that just draw you in, like, and I think just trying to be cognizant of that, and maybe trying to kind of be a quiet listener at this stage is something that's been pretty good, to try and just develop that side of things. But like I said, he's just so good at talking at the right time and then listening as well. Like he's, so like, I think that I've learned so much straight away there, like, in terms of, even, to be honest with you, like, not as a hurling manager, like, even, if you're just trying to be a person, to be quite honest with you.
If you're not from Kilkenny, Brian Cody's clearly Sauron. That was like, that's where that was.
That was implied. I just didn't want to say.
There you go. It's okay. It's okay. We feel comfortable saying these types of things. But if you're from Kilkenny, obviously he's everything. He's all the rest of it. He's the good one. He's the
One Ring.
He's the Eagles coming to save you. it's really interesting listening to you just talk. I'm on the managerial route and I'm trying to soak up as much information as I can. Do you have a time frame in your head for where that goes, or is that the type of thing that actually is just a bad idea from the get-go, because then you put yourself on a clock, and the wrong opportunity at the wrong time might be something that you feel like you have to force yourself into?
I feel like you've answered the question better than like exactly almost as I'd like to answer it myself. You're really there. Like, I think for a while actually at the start of it, I would have thought, yeah, you're on a clock now, you have to do this by 30, you have to do this by 35 and this by 40. And like, well, I turned 30 there last month, and you realise very quickly that, Jesus, no, actually this is more of a kind of a journey, and you don't really get to choose at what point you get to take certain exits. We'll say you just have to, they'll appear for you, and like you kind of have to be smart and patient with it. Like, and so I think, like you said, like if you put yourself on that clock, you know, you rush headlong into something because you think, oh, I have to do this and I have to do that, instead of, you know, just like when you get an opportunity to maybe do something a little bit less, we'll say a little bit less kind of high pressure, but more, you know, learning based, we'll say, which is what this has definitely been for me. Like, it's just been a totally different experience, and totally different experience of learning in that. Like, you learn different things about yourself, and some, not all of them might be perfectly relevant to management. Like, there's no such thing as something that you've learned that's not going to be relevant for you going forward, because you learn skills with all of that. So like, I think, like you said, like putting a clock on it would be foolish. Like, I've actually going into my seventh year, would have been my 8th year, like involved in colleges hurling at the moment, this year, which is amazing to me that it's actually so long. You know, going into my 5th year involved with club stuff, like which to me at my age seems like loads. Like, I'm kind of like, Jesus, that's nearly a third of my life, or it's nearly a sixth of my life. But, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's absolutely no time at all. Like, and there's still loads that you have to, like, there's loads more John Allens that you have to try and meet and soak things up from. Like, so I think putting a clock on it would be silly. Like, to be honest, I think, like you said, it's a case of just take it kind of experience by experience and learn as much as you can.
The other thing about coaching and management is that obviously the game evolves really quickly, and I'm very interested in like what your desire as a manager is. Do you want to be somebody who has a definitive style of play that actually you think is going to be successful in almost every scenario, or are you pretty desperate to like be able to have 5 or 6 different things that you can ask your team to do? Like, it doesn't feel like Pep Guardiola has multiple ways to play, because it feels like he believes that there is the best way to win. And I don't know if Paul Kinnerk feels something similar, or if Paul Kinnerk would actually just skin you in any game in a different way if he thought that was the way to win it. Like, how do you approach the tactical side and the acquisition of the skills as a manager to implement those tactics? What's your idea behind that?
I think, like, to be honest, like, you cut your cloth to fit your measure. Like, I think, like, the reason Kilkenny worked for so long with what seemed like a rudimentary game plan was that they actually had the bodies that were best suited to winning that kind of game. And like, I think if Paul Kinnerk and if Limerick didn't have, you know, the kind of players they did, they might say, okay, we want to play this way, but we have to tweak it a certain bit. Like, I think even, look, I spoke to Paul years ago, like, and we spoke about stuff like this, and like, he used the term kind of principles of play, which I thought was good, because it kind of allowed you like a framework, but that you had flexibility within it. And I think for me personally, that's probably the way I would think about the game as well. Like, I would think there is certainly a right way and a wrong way in general, but equally, you know, like, it's nearly like it's difficult. It's kind of a language debate, really. Like, you can talk about systems or tactics, like, and like one is for a specific game where you might tweak something, but that you still generally have an actual method to your play, like, and that there are still kind of general things that you do, even if you change 1 or 2 slight things for a game. And I think even, look, like, Guardiola can say that he has this and he's that, and all he wants is small, tricky wingers and that, but like, he's happy enough when Erling Haaland is scoring 700 goals in a season for him, and he's not exactly your typical Pep kind of player. Like, he runs in behind, he's a brute around the box. So like, I think everyone, no matter how dogmatic they might be, if they're going to have any success, has to be some bit flexible to certain ways. Like, for me, like in hurling, like in the last couple of years, in the last 7 years, like I've played, like not I, like the teams that I've been involved with, but like we've played loads of different ways. We've played with sweepers, we've played with 3 in midfield, we've played with 4 in the half forward line. We tried playing 4 in the full forward line once, just to try and, you know, open up a half forward line. Like there's so many different things that you can try and do, like, and like some of them work really well and some of them are complete disasters and you look like an idiot. Like, but I think it's just a case of kind of learning how each of them kind of works best, and then kind of learning how to apply them to certain situations. Because like even within games, sometimes the right thing to do is to sit someone back in front of your full back line for 5 minutes just to settle things down, and then sometimes the right thing to do is actually to squeeze up. And like you even see that, like football is nearly always, with the exception of Limerick, Gaelic football is always 5 or 10 years ahead of hurling tactically. And like you even see now, like in football, teams push up and then they drop off, and then they push up and then they drop off, because they don't actually want you to figure them out. You know, they have, within a game, they have even different kind of plans for different phases of games and different game states. So I think, like, to be honest, like having one set kind of pattern, it doesn't work. Whatever about soccer, it's a bit more controlled. In Gaelic games, like, there is an element, there's still always going to be an element of chaos to it, especially in hurling when the ball can go 90 yards. Like, there's just always going to be, like, coaches are always going to try and control things, but there's always going to be an element of chaos. Like, that's why you get probably contests that we get, which are so memorable.
I think, Jimmy, most people will be familiar with the Underdogs concept and this idea that only 30 players can obviously reach the ultimate challenge match at the end. That, of course, means that you have to make, as management, the tough decision, you know, each week to drop one or more players. Like, having spoken to different managers in different sports over the last number of years, they often say that can be the most difficult aspect of the job, letting people down who feel like they maybe should be involved. Like, is that something, and you'll be well used to it with Fitzgibbon Cup teams yourself, but do you find that the most difficult part of the job, or it's not easy, especially when it's on the TV as well? It doesn't make it easy for those players getting dropped.
Yeah, it's you know what, that's definitely the worst part of the whole thing. It's the eliminations, and I suppose, like you said there, Shane, like the fact that it's on TV as well, so you're kind of, there's a human aspect to it, and that, like, you know, you're kind of like you feel for the person, because they've put in, like, they've been brave to come, they've been brave to stay involved for the start, because, you know, there's plenty lads signed up and then kind of might have come to the first trial and then dropped out, and, you know, for various reasons. Some people dropped out before the first trial even, you know, said they'll do it and then decided not to. Like, so it's like, you would have fierce respect for anyone that puts themselves forward in anything in life, like, and this is just another one of those things, like, and so you'd have huge respect for someone to do that, and then to have to tell someone that what really wants to be somewhere that their journey is over. Like, I think there's a huge difference. Like, if you were dropping someone from a squad because of commitment issues, you wouldn't lose. I personally, like, you wouldn't lose a night's peace over it. Like, but when you're dropping someone from a squad who really wants to be there and who's working really hard to be there, like, that isn't nice. Like, and I suppose that is the thing you sign up to, that if you want to go down the line, so you can't be squeamish about it. But, you know, equally, like, I don't think you'd be well suited to management if you couldn't see the human side of that either. Like, and that is tough. And even, you know, the eliminations, I found, like, we wrapped up our last camp there 2 weeks ago. So that was the last of it. Like, and you found that with each camp, the eliminations got harder, because you were getting, because, like, we only met these guys 5-6 months ago, like you're getting to know them better as people as well, and it's just harder to, you know, to tell someone that you've grown to know and like that the journey's over than with, say, someone you might only know a wet week.
When is the match?
The match is I'm not certain, but I think it's the end of October. I think we're waiting for absolute confirmation, but right. I think it's the last weekend of October.
Okay, and so will you be training in between, obviously, to try and...
Yeah. So also, like, we wrapped up our last camp last week, but we still have a couple more training sessions over the next 2 months. We'll say there's a couple of them scheduled in for the next couple of Saturdays and throughout October as well.
I think it's becoming an increasingly interesting concept. as time goes on, because we understand just how difficult it is to commit to intercounty and the level of training that has to go on. And Brodie used the phrase indentured servants, slaves. Did he call them slaves?
Indentured slaves, I think. Didn't he say that?
So I'd say there's lots of people who are intercounty standard who in their early 20s decided that they probably didn't have the level of commitment to give to it, but who in their late 20s are like, geez, I really wish I had maybe tried it before. Yeah.
But to be honest, sure, another thing we found here, and it was no massive surprise to me, just given I'm involved with my own club at home, and we're only in the kind of the 5th grade in Cork, but the level of commitment that we ask of the lads is pretty high, and they give it like a lot of guys. The club commitments, has certainly it has made for, we'll say, over the last couple of camps where numbers are up and they're down, and they're up and they're down, because lads' club commitments are so heavy as well. And we, from the very start, we were very much of the opinion that we were trying to help lads get better at their clubs, not impact on the clubs in a negative way. So that this isn't a complaint as such, but just the reality is that at club level now, the commitment of your top players is absolutely huge. I don't know, do people realise the club commitment of, we'll say, I think people are starting to realise the club commitment of, we'll say, the guys in the very top clubs, we'll say your Kilmacuds and Ballygunners and them, that they are operating at a very, very high level. But to be honest with you, if you go to any half-serious intermediate or junior club in most counties, there is actually quite a serious level of commitment asked of players and that, that's why the standard, that's why the overall standard has gone up at intercounty, but also at club level. It's not an amazement to me to see that, and that's why I suppose it will be interesting to see in a month, a month and a bit's time now, how, when you get a collection of guys who are training at that level already with their clubs and get them together, how they can compete against guys at the next rung up the ladder. And we're under no illusions, unlike maybe some in club GA who will remain nameless, that there is still a huge jump from club to county GA. There's a massive jump, and it'll be a huge challenge for the lads. But that's what they've signed up for, is that challenge of saying, can I compete? Whether they can or they can't, that's something that we'll find out on this pitch. And that's the thing I love about sport, is that it's a meritocracy. You get what you deserve, but they want to see, if I put in a bit of work with guys of similar level, can I compete with the guys at the next level up?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Well, the new season starts on September 15th at 9:30 on TG Gar. Gormalgut, August, best of luck with everything. I think your coaching journey over the next while is going to be really interesting, Jamie. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Gormalgut, Slán.
Jamie Wall there, who is part of the Underdogs management team. I've been in on the Underdogs since Donaghy.
That was when someone got so big from it, everyone was like, right, there's something in this.
Yeah. And it went away for about a decade, and they brought it back, and it's
quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. OTB Sports Radio today, 1 o'clock. OTB Gold is Barry Ryan, his cycling book called The Ascent. 3 o'clock is Leaders' Questions with Stuart Lancaster. Our retro panel is Sport and Irish Identity at 4. And OTB Gold is Keith Andrews meeting Philly McMahon. Tomorrow it is Adrian Barry and Aisling O'Reilly. Daniel Harris is going to preview the weekend's football. Alan Quinlan will pick the best 15 he's ever played against. Dominic Fifield will be along to talk Chelsea and Spurs, and there's loads more as well. Right now, we're going to leave you with some David Gillick goodness. See ya. I'll see you tomorrow evening. Good luck.
Okay, European Week of Sports 2022 takes place this month, and it will be a unique celebration aimed at promoting physical activity in people of all ages, backgrounds and fitness levels. And it's all in association with Sport Ireland, who are calling on you and your family to get out and #BeActive between the 23rd and 30th of September. For more information and to find an event near you can go to sportireland.ie/European Week of Sport. Among the ambassadors for the project, and no better placed to be so, is Olympian David Gillick. David, you're very welcome back to the show.
Hey Richie, how are you?
I'm good. This event and this week is all about, as I say, getting people out there and getting people active. And I suppose we've had no better inspiration than in the past couple of weeks and Ireland's exploits at the European Championships.
Yeah, look, it was a great week over in Munich. I
I think, for athletics, we got great coverage. There wasn't many kind of other sports, dominating the media in Ireland at the time. So it was great to see athletics kind of grab some headlines. Obviously, we had some great results, so credit to all the athletes, and kind of really put the sport at the forefront of people's minds. And I think, it's nice to come back off the back of a championship and have people talking about athletics and, talking about the athletes and, a couple of medals in there as well, but mainly the performances, because, the sport needs that. When you look at, say, kind of, off the back of Tokyo, we haven't won a medal in athletics for a very long time. So, the way the model in Ireland is, your funding is very much kind of relies on medals. So, I think for the sport now, it's in a good place to maybe bang on the door of the powers that be and say, look, we're producing good athletes. We're up kind of on a rankings. We're getting people into finals and national records and PBs. And I think Munich really kind of showcased athletics in Ireland as, potentially going places.
Yeah, Cathal Dennehy touched upon this in the piece after the Euros a couple of weeks ago, where he said that the funding model that's in place for the athletes notionally is it's okay. Everything like this could always be better. But in terms of the supports that are there for Irish coaches is something that is severely lacking. And that will go back to your day and even before that again, whereby coaches in this country are being asked to perform minor miracles and get people to European, world, Olympic level, and doing it on a shoestring and doing it while not being properly funded themselves, whereas the athletes would be.
Yeah, look, that's pretty much the way it has been for the last couple of decades. And, when I was coming through as well, particularly when I was based in Ireland, my coach, Jim Kidd, was a volunteer. He had a family of his own. He had mortgages, bills, he had a job. That took priority for him, as rightly so, So again, when he's coaching, it was more of a hobby, even though he invested a lot of his own time and his own expense to bring me here, there and everywhere. And, I think when you look at the success that we've had in Munich, what we really want to do now is try and make that sustainable. And, as Cathal rightly pointed out, our athletes they're actually very well funded now individually when you get to a certain level, and they have the services that go with that, i.e. dietitian, physio, all that nice stuff that you need, a holistic care of an athlete. And again, you look, at the facilities now in Ireland has come on leaps and bounds with the Institute of Sport, the Sport Campus out in Abbottstown, but one kind of key area, which is so vital to an athlete's performance is their coach. And, if your coach has other responsibilities and other priorities, that are probably going to take more of his time and effort and attention. Well, then where does that leave an athlete who's preparing for an Olympics or a World Championships? And, in my time, I relocated over to Loughborough, where there was a full-time setup. I saw what British athletes had on the ground, and it blew my mind, from full-time coaches, there day in, day out. But also, when you go to a championship and you set your blocks and you're on that start line, you want to look at other people and go, I'm on the same kind of page, I'm on the same kind of level as you. And for a lot of our athletes, when it comes to their coaching, it's not comparable to other European or other world nations. So it is definitely an area that hopefully we can try and improve upon. And like I said at the start, it's kind of an opportunity now to maybe bang on that door and try and get a little bit more funding to maybe put into coaching and support our coaches. So if there is training camps, if there is championships, if there's needs there that maybe the sport can help support that coach, because if we can kind of potentially do that in a better way, well then maybe things can become a little bit more sustainable from a performance point of view. And athletics is a tricky sport. We can talk about rowing, we can talk about boxing, where you can look at it and go, maybe one coach can coach athletes because it's the same discipline of sorts. Whereas when it comes to athletics, there's jumping, throwing, walking, running long distance, sprint. There's so much to it. And that's probably been the tricky thing that's maybe held back funding going into coaching. But I think now we've shown what we potentially could do. We have a great crop of juniors and young athletes coming through. So, I'd love to see maybe a bit of work around that to go forward.
You mentioned banging on the door. I mean, what form does that have to take? Does that make official presentations to the Department of Sport? Does that mean Sport Ireland or Athletics Ireland going to the department and going to Jack Chambers and making their case in a slightly more formal basis than just kind of the odd column in a newspaper in the immediate aftermath of a major championships?
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, it's literally breaking through that door and getting them to sit down and shoving it in their face, to be brutally honest. You know, I think it's a case of, you know, highlighting what we have done, you know, not just on medals, but placings. Like athletics it's a global sport. There's very little kind of barriers to entry for a lot of people. Like anyone can get out and run. And we've seen that, you know, when you look at the global kind of nations that compete and the nations that win medals, everyone can get involved. And I think when you look at that, you kind of understand that medals they're tough to get. They're tough to, performances are tough at the high level. So the fact that we've had a good week, it's now that shop window, it's that small window of opportunity to really get into to Sport Ireland and really kind of bang the door and go, look, this is what we need, this is what we want. We're producing, but we need extra help and we need extra funds to do that. Also, it's you know, getting out and looking for additional income. It's sponsors. It's providing, you know, again, going back to the headlines and the showcasing of what we could do. It's an opportunity now to maybe look at kind of a title sponsor coming on board. You know, getting a few things that maybe can directly help our athletes. You know, and we've seen other. You know, you look at the OFI, you look what they've done post 2016, you know, the rebrand and obviously getting success and bringing in new sponsors and filtering that down to the athletes. And I think, you know, maybe there's an opportunity there that we could try and just kind of have additional income coming in as well, because we can't overly rely on Sport Ireland. You know, it would be foolish. We need numerous streams of income and headlines and performances all help for that. So again, it's like athletics isn't the mainstream sport where it's in the media week in, week out. So we few and far between kind of opportunities to really kind of beat our drum. And I think off the back of Munich, we have that opportunity.
You can kind of see as well that the corporate world would want to get involved with, and I hate to frame it as such, a product like Irish athletics, because you saw during that week the way people who weren't necessarily household names at all, like Israel Olatunde, I think the likes of myself and yourself, people who were around athletics probably would have heard the name. You would have been more familiar with him than I. But the general wider public wouldn't have known him. They come away a week later and Ireland's on first name terms with people like Israel Olatunde, with Rashida Adeleke. And that shows, like we talk about our athletes going back years, like it's always people, they break through and they become like almost like a share. There's like a first name basis to them. There's your Sonias, there's your Katrinas, there's your Thomases, there's your Davids. Everybody knows who you're talking about. And athletics can cut through in that kind of way. And if you kind of feel that the public will is there behind them, then surely the kind of corporate cash would be there too to back them up.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think, you know, the sport is so diverse. We talk about equality in sport, but you've got nothing better than athletics. It's male, it's female, you know, there's a wide range and kind of appeal to it. And I think it's, you know, where we are now socially, I think athletics is at the forefront of that. I think we've seen phenomenal young athletes coming through, the Israels, the Rashidas, all the people that you've mentioned, you know, the likes of Ephraim Gade as well, who's got a fantastic backstory, you know, coming to the country and all that. And I think that kind of from a corporate perspective, I would like to think would, like, dare I say, take a lot of boxes for a lot of companies to kind of look at and maybe support, because you know that diversity and that equality is there, and it's just trying to support the next generation to come through. And you know, maybe that's an avenue to kind of get the additional funding in to support coaches, because you know we need to be stronger in the grassroots. We need to make sure that like everyone can go to an athletics track or an athletics club and, you know, not be dominated by the bigger sports, because in essence, that's one of the biggest challenges as well. Like if you're a fast runner, you might end up on the wing of a rugby pitch, because you know what, there's more people on the ground that are going out and like RDOs and regional development officers and stuff like that from those sports. So, you know, I'd love to see a corporate kind of really come in and help kind of push the brand of athletics, the product of athletics, whatever term you want to use. But you know, we've huge opportunities going forward. It's 2 years out from Paris as well, where you know, let's be honest, the main kind of media begins to focus on Olympics, and athletics is always a sport that you know has a lot to do with the Olympic movement. You know, and I think as well, like like the thing that kind of got me about Munich is when I came back after covering it with RTE, it was very much like people were talking about it. People really got into it. I think, you know, the amount of people that go, oh, I used to run. Oh, God, or I go up and I do my park run, or I do this and I do that. You know, everybody has like ran at some point and can maybe relate a little bit to the athletes and the speeds that they're going, perhaps, you know. And I think it's kind of tapping into that. Like we've all done PE and sports day in school, which involved a little bit of athletics. And I think, again, it's selling that to maybe the next generation and even kind of coaches of other sports, that athletics can add so much to the development of young sports people. And that's something that I think, again, in itself, you talk about a product that maybe we could harness that again, just to showcase the sport in a good light.
And in the, I guess, the simplest terms, it is a very diverse sport in that there's a lot of different events in it. Like there's short races, there's long races, there's throwing stuff, and there's jumping. Like that's a very sellable thing to a young kid to try and get them involved.
Absolutely. There's a lot of research going into that long-term development of kids in sport, and also kind of performance, and when do we specialize and all the rest of it, and I think you look at the fundamentals of sport, the ABCs, agility, balance, coordination, you get that in spades in athletics. It's I think the thing that has probably held us back a little bit is kind of that accessibility to maybe a local track. But again, that is changing now. Like even in my area in Dublin, after 11 years of having not one track in the Dunleary Rathdown area, we've now got two, with UCD and DSD. Sure. My own club putting tracks in place. Like that's great. And there's tracks kind of popping up around the country. It's just, again, highlighting that and selling it and really trying to enforce the good of athletics. And look, you need heroes. Every sport does. And I think going back to Munich, when you see the likes of like a 19-year-old and a 20-year-old, making finals, and not only making finals, but actually challenging. Like they were up there with some of the best in Europe and beating them. And I'm just delighted that we got that window where I think we got the headlines and people are talking about it. It's now about, okay, what do we do now? How do we harness this for the greater good of the sport and pushing it forward?
Is that kind of change, and it's probably going to be a yes, but is that kind of change and that kind of influx of money into sports coaching enough to make a difference towards Paris in a couple of years' time for those top level athletes, or is it something that just needs to be put in place for the longer term?
I think there is some, dare I say, that kind of low hanging fruit. I think, there is some coaches there that are working with some of the names that we've mentioned who are very much on that kind of volunteer basis in terms of the sport. So an extra pot of cash would definitely aid their preparation in terms of camps, getting good services, maybe going away and training with some other kind of great athletes and getting into those groups. That all costs money. But again, there's a long-term play at this as well. So, you're looking at kind of the juniors coming through, even the likes of Israel and Rashida, who are young. You've got Paris, but then you're on to LA, and a cycle goes so fast. So again, there's opportunities here for that short-term kind of improvements, but also looking at the long-term. Okay, how do we, whether it's bringing in event coaches and trying to kind of coordinate some of the volunteers and put, maybe it's sending individuals away on training, coaching training, and maybe sending them over to different people around the world, to the States, and getting that insight to those kind of groups that are professional and bringing that back. Like what I'd love to see as well, that we have a program of assistant coaches or apprentice coaches. That's what, when I was over in England in 2012, in the years leading up to 2012 London Olympics, they brought in a couple of Canadian coaches who were well regarded in the world of athletics globally. But interesting what they did, they brought them in, but straight away they brought in British apprentice coaches to work under these people for the 3 to 4 year cycle ahead of London. So after London, the Canadians went away, but yet they had a whole crop of young, talented, and therefore experienced almost British coaches to take on for the next cycle. And I think that's a great way of kind of that coaching pipeline. You're nurturing that and you're bringing that through.
And you need obviously the funding to do that as well. You touched on the kind of diversity of it as well. It has been brilliant to see the new Ireland effect in the team, in Team Ireland, essentially over the course of the last couple of years, and the way it has grown from having your Gina Akpe-Moses up to Rashida's and up to Israel's and all that kind of stuff. It is a fantastic representation and a great mirror back to the country to show what is capable in that kind of environment.
100%, and it's I'm involved in the sport, and I've been kind of watching Israel and Patience and all these people kind of coming through over the last couple of years, and they're excelling at junior level. And again, you use that kind of phrase, the new Ireland. Yes, it is, and it shows the diverse kind of nature of Ireland right now. You've got athletes with Nigerian heritage, Ghanaian heritage, but Ireland's their home, and they've kind of bed into the local communities, and they got involved in the local clubs, and it's great to have that talent now coming through to the level where they're performing on a European or a global level. And I think again, it just kind of highlights the important contribution that these people are now bringing to our sport. And a rising tide helps all boats, or rises all boats. And I think when we see that level of talent, you look at, say, Israel, and then you look at like we've a relay, a 4x1 men's team. You look at Rashida in the 400. We now have a 4x4 women's relay team who are extremely talented as well. So all of that just kind of success breeds success, and it's inspiring maybe people who have come to this country with their parents, or they're born here. The parents have come maybe from other areas of the world, and the opportunities that are in this country to get involved in local clubs, because like the world's at their feet. Then like Israel, who I know and I've chatted to him numerous occasions. Like a lad that spends probably 4 hours on public transport to get to college, to get over to Tallaght to train, and then get home. Like 4 hours on public transport, and that's his perseverance. That's his mental attitude, which is something that stands to him when it comes to a performance, and that's inspirational really to anyone. And again, it's kind of telling that story because it will 100% inspire other people to maybe get involved in the sport and give it a go.
On Rashida, does it make you sick as somebody who dedicated their life to the 400 metres to see somebody at the age of 19 who's raced literally a handful of competitive 400s to go into a European Championship final and come as close to a medal as she did? Like that's almost freakish in how talented she is.
Yeah, she is very talented, and like she was lane 1 in that European final, which is a brutal lane for 400 metres, and I think that was her 6th race over that distance. And again, I've kind of tracked Rashida over the last couple of years and doing 1s and 2s. But for me, I suppose, as a 400-metre athlete, I was like, she's going to be 400 is going to be her best. And, we saw that straight away in Oregon when she ran really fast. And then that kind of gave her the appetite to give the Europeans a go. And you're kind of going, oh, my God, like she's only 19. She's now gone 20. But like even at 20, like she's hitting the heights that can take kind of years for athletes to get to, including myself. But it also shows the potential that she has. And, you look at kind of Paris and, people talk about, oh, can this crop kind of go straight into Paris and perform? You have to look at it kind of individually. And, like the likes of Israel, there's other people in there, Kate O'Connor in the heptathlon. They have to work on making sure that they qualify because it's difficult. Whereas Rashida is like, she could go and she could perform and she could arguably, I'm going to throw it out there, she could, produce a medal. She's that good. And, you look what she did in this summer and you're kind of going like, it's untapped. She hasn't learned how to race 400 metres and she openly says that, she's gone off too fast, too slow. But it's incredible. And I think that's the excitement around athletics now. She kind of sums that up, that excitement that people are they're talking about these people now as if, they're going to go and medal, like we used to talk about the likes of Sonia Sullivan and, people gone before that. So, like, yeah, it's brilliant. And yeah, am I envious? Of course I'm envious. I'd love to be 19 and going up there and challenging for medals and all the rest of it.
That kind of excitement as well is really reciprocated. It comes through a lot during the post-race interviews that you do. Like you're immediately trackside and you kind of get to get an immediate kind of pulse on these things. Like there is an enthusiasm, like a natural buoyant enthusiasm within that squad, whether they're household names or not at the moment, that really comes through the TV screen.
Yeah, like you just get that sense that, I think Israel, when he kicked off, he was day one, he made that final, and you could kind of see the other athletes then grown within themselves. It was almost like he just set the tone and people just like the likes of Louise Shanahan, again, great performance, made a final of the 800 metres, all the way through to like the final day, we win a medal. Like this is the stuff that we've probably looked in the past and kind of went, okay, like if everything goes our way, we could have a great week. But so many times we fall at the first hurdle and it's just a slippery slope downwards then. Whereas this was just like, there's a lot of people that would have been following athletics for years and decades in their lifetime, probably were pinching themselves by about Thursday going like, hang on a second, is this really happening? But I think you're right. And it's that sort of ecosystem. And like, it's a word that I've used when I went to Loughborough. I kind of realized that, when you're surrounded by these kind of people and people who are doing really well and winning medals, you feed off that. And I think, to be fair with Sport Ireland, the Institute of Sport, there is a centre where people are kind of coming in and out. They're crossing paths and rubbing shoulders with people from different sports, but again, all Irish here, training away, kind of getting their services. But it's that sort of ecosystem, it's that environment. And particularly, in athletics, there is that now. And a lot of these juniors have come up through the ranks together. And we're beginning to see that now when they come into the seniors, that, the success that they've had at junior, why can't we? And I love that. And like Israel's like, why can't I be the best in the world? And that's the thing that maybe as Irish people, we're a little bit like, oh, I don't know. We're not comfortable about like, saying that. Whereas I think this kind of crop coming through are very much like, yeah, give it a go. Why can't we do it?
For all the promise of the sprinters and stuff like that, it was obviously left to the old stagers from up north to kind of bring home the medals. And it was brilliant vindication for Mark English, I guess, who's had a couple of rough years, and certainly Ciara McGeehan has as well, both in terms of injuries and in terms of form. They've hit lows, like they've hit very tangible lows. So for them to both come away from Munich with medals was absolutely huge, both on the personal level and I guess for the entire team as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I suppose the headlines were all grabbed early in the week by some of the younger people in the team. And, you look at Ciara and you look at Mark, who, both kind of 29, 30, some would say, in the twilight years of their career. But in terms of their events, they're probably only in their prime, and I think with Mark in particular, like, I'll put my hands up. I criticised Mark back in the Euro indoors a couple of years ago where, tactically he wasn't there with some of them. He's well capable, tactically he wasn't. And I have to say, like, this year, credit where it's due, he was like ridiculously spot on with his tactics throughout the whole year. And it put him in a great position. He was running fast. And, that's one thing. You can run fast, but you have to be able to... Am I there? Yes,
yeah.
You have to be able to put it together in a championship environment where there's no pacers and all the rest of it. And, we were kind of tracking these over the summer, kind of going, if things go well here, they could get a medal.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Off the ball.